Close your eyes and let the night settle around you like an old velvet curtain. The world is quiet now. The hum of the day fades into the soft rhythm of your breathing. You are safe, and you are still. Tonight, you will drift through time, not through books or battlefields, but through memories that sleep beneath the surface of the sea. Beyond the waves, beneath the fog, lies an island, green and rain-washed, wrapped in the whisper of centuries. An island that once dreamed of sails and stars, of maps and empires, of faraway lands carried on the wind. This is not the story of war, nor conquest, nor crown, but of dreams. Of people who looked to the horizon and wondered what waited there. Of voices that sang across oceans. Of history that breathes in the quiet of the night. As you rest, the story will unfold slowly like parchment unrolling, like dawn rising over a silver sea. We begin at the edge of time itself, where stone circles stand in silence, where fires burn low in the mist, where ancient feet pressed softly into damp earth. The empire is not yet born. The island sleeps, wrapped in green hills and old legends. Listen, the wind carries whispers of kings and sailors, of merchants and poets, of storms and sunlight, of a world forever reaching outward. Let those whispers cradle you. Let the past become your lullaby. You are floating now between centuries, between heartbeats, between what was and what will be. Each breath carries you deeper into history. Each moment carries you further into peace. And as you drift across the ocean of time, the first light of empire begins to glimmer on the horizon. Welcome, traveler, to the lullaby of empire, to the story of the British Empire, and to the gentle dream of a world once ruled by stars and tides. Now, rest, and let history sing you to sleep. Chapter 1. The Island in the Mist. The wind moves softly over the cliffs tonight. It carries the scent of prizes, salt and heather, a mingling of sea and stone that has brushed these shores since before time had a name. The island sleeps beneath a blanket of mist, its hills rising and falling like the slow breath of an ancient creature. Somewhere beyond the fog, the sea murmurs to itself, patient and endless. Long before kings, before flags, before the notion of an empire, this island was a quiet place of fires and dreams. Its people lived by the rhythm of rain and season, their hearts tuned to the sound of the tide. They built with stone and story, whispering to the gods they saw in rivers and stars. In their hands, the earth was sacred. In their eyes, the horizon was mystery. On nights like this, when the fog rolled in from the sea, they would gather by the fire, the soft glow painting their faces in amber light. Old voices told of spirits that moved with the wind, of warriors and watchers, of gods who guarded the hills. Every tale was a thread, and every thread bound them together, tribe to tribe, heart to heart. There were wars, yes, but they were not yet the wars of empire. They were the quiet storms of survival, struggles over land, over hunger, over pride. Yet, even in their battles, there was something slow, almost mournful, a respect, born of knowing that each side was carved from the same soil. The island was both cradle and cage, both protector and test. In the east, where the land curved like a bent sword, the dawns came pale and silver. In the west, beyond the moors and marshes, storms brewed over the horizon, and between them lay villages, circles of wood and earth, where laughter mixed with labor, and where songs rose at night to thank the sky for another day survived. Time passed as gently as the flow of a river. The people learned, adapted, and built. From wooden huts came stone walls, from tribes came small kingdoms. They called upon chieftains and kings, men whose names were carried on the breath of bards. Some led with wisdom, others with fear, yet all were shaped by the same truth. This island, surrounded by restless seas, demanded unity or ruin. Then came the invaders, first whispers from beyond the waves. Ships carved from oak, painted with salt and courage. They came not as storms, but as tides, slow and steady, claiming beach after beach. The Romans came with their legions, their banners, and their roads that still sleep beneath the grass. They brought order, and with it, the quiet weight of empire. To the tribes who watched their fires fade under foreign flags, it must have felt like the end of the world. But history, like the tide, does not end. It changes shape. Some fought, some yielded. And in that meeting between conqueror and conquered, the island began to change. Languages blended, customs mingled, and in the shadow of Roman walls, something new began to breathe. Centuries later, when the legions withdrew, they left behind not just stones and stories, but a strange emptiness, a silence that the wind filled once more. The tribes returned to their ways, yet the echo of empire lingered. It was as if the island had tasted something vast and could never quite forget. There were wars again, of course. The Saxons came, fierce and proud. The Vikings followed, bringing both destruction and trade. The island became a tapestry woven from conquest and resilience. Each thread told a story of fire and frost, of faith and fury. But through it all, one truth endured. No matter who ruled, the island remained. There is a kind of peace in this history, a rhythm like the seas. Empires rise, they fall, and the land remembers. The soil beneath your feet carries the memory of every footstep before yours. It does not hate, it does not boast. It simply endures. By now, in this moment of twilight, the mists thicken again. The fires of those early villages have long since turned to dust, but their warmth lingers in the heart of every tale that followed. The sound of the waves against the cliffs is the same sound they once heard. The moon that hangs above is the same one they once prayed to. Time moves forward, yet it circles too, always returning to where it began. The early kings came and went. They built wooden halls that glowed with candlelight, and feasted while the winds howled beyond the doors. They made oaths, broke them, forged new ones again. And from their rivalries, the first sense of something greater began to take shape. The island, divided for centuries, began to whisper of unity, not yet a nation, but a shared breath, a shared destiny. The wars softened with time, or perhaps men grew weary of fighting their kin. New threats came from beyond the sea, and the island learned that survival meant standing together. What began as scattered tribes began to dream of a single banner, a single name that might bind them all. The mist over the cliffs tonight feels heavy with those dreams. You can almost hear them, faint as a heartbeat beneath the wind, the voices of warriors long gone, of queens and shepherds, of builders and dreamers, all part of the same long song. The first chapter of Empire is not about power or conquest. It is about endurance, about an island that learned, again and again, how to rise from ruin, about people who looked beyond the storms and saw the promise of morning. The Romans left their walls, the Saxons their words, the Vikings their courage, and the Celts their soul. Together, these became the bones of Britain, the heart that would one day reach across the world. Now, as the centuries sleep, the island rests again. The wars are quiet now, the swords rusted, the banners gone. Only the land remains, and the gentle sound of the sea. You can almost imagine it, a lone torch flickering on a cliffside, the last watchman staring out into the darkness, waiting for dawn. His breath clouds the cold air, and for a moment he feels the pulse of something vast beneath his feet. Not empire yet, not greatness, but potential, a dream waiting to awaken. And so, the story begins. Not with a crown, nor a battle cry, but with mist and silence. The island stands weary, beautiful, eternal. In time, its people will rise again. They will build, explore, and shape the world in ways they cannot yet imagine. But for now, in this first chapter of their long journey, they sleep cradled by wind and wave, guarded by memory, waiting for history to call their name. The fog thickens, the sea hums softly below, and the island, ancient, patient, and proud, breathes in the quiet promise of dawn. Chapter 2: The Crown and the Cross. The mists have thinned now. The island no longer drifts in silence. From the east, faint sunlight spills over forests and fields, lighting the spires of stone that rise where once there were only wooden halls. The world is changing. The air hums with the sound of hammers, of prayer, of quiet ambition. From scattered tribes, a nation begins to take form. Kings speak not only to their people now, but to something greater, to the idea of unity, of rule, of destiny. The island breathes differently, slower and stronger, as though awakening from a long, patient sleep. It is an age of crowns and of crosses. The warriors of the old gods lay down their swords before the altars of new faith. The cross comes with whispers of salvation, of eternal peace, and of power. Priests walk the same paths where druids once stood. Monks carry the word of a distant god written on fragile parchment, while in cold stone halls, kings listen and learn the language of heaven and rule. But beneath the quiet prayers, the island still remembers war. The Saxons and Danes have mixed their blood, and though peace flickers like a fragile flame, it is never certain. The land itself feels tense, fertile, and restless. One hill bears a church, another a fortress. The horizon holds both hope and fear, yet amid the uncertainty, beauty begins to bloom. The first cathedrals rise like dreams, made solid, their arches reaching for the sky. Bells toll softly across valleys, calling both peasants and princes to the same voice, the same faith. For the first time, something unites the island, beyond kinship or sword belief. The new kings see it too. The cross brings not only devotion, but structure, order, a sense of destiny that feels larger than any one man. To rule is now divine, a duty as much as a desire. The crown and the cross become entwined, shimmering like gold threads in a single tapestry. But all golden things are fragile. When kings grow proud, wars return, not as sudden storms, but as slow, grinding tides. Brothers claim the same throne, lords rise and fall. The soil drinks the cost of ambition. Each field of wheat carries a memory of battle beneath it. In the quiet spaces between those wars, life continues. A shepherd hums on the hillside. A mother teaches her child an old song. The blacksmith's forge glows late into the night. The people endure, as they always have, building, tending, believing. And yet, beyond the seas, others watch. In Normandy, across the narrow channel, a duke sharpens his claim. William the Conqueror, though he does not yet bear the title, looks upon the misty island and sees more than a neighbor. He sees inheritance, destiny, empire. When his sails finally rise, they fill not only with wind, but with centuries of ambition. The invasion of 1066 will become legend, but in this quiet retelling, it begins as all storms do, with stillness. The sea holds its breath, the gulls cry once and vanish into the fog. The ships come like ghosts, their oars dip into the water with the rhythm of a heartbeat. On the shore, Harold's men wait weary, scarred, their eyes dark with resolve. The clash that follows is not just a battle for land, but for the soul of the island itself. And when it ends, and the smoke clears, a new silence falls heavier than before. The crown now sits upon the head of a prize, foreign king. The old language lingers, but a new tongue begins to rise beside it. In the heart of the island, something shifts forever. Yet the conquest, for all its blood, brings also rebirth. The Normans build as they rule castles like mountains, cathedrals that pierce the heavens. Stone becomes the new voice of power. Where wooden halls once echoed with song, cold walls now murmur with Latin prayer. The empire's seed has been planted, though no one yet knows it. The island learns to breathe again, slower now, under new masters. French words mix with Saxon ones. Customs entwine, faith deepens, art blossoms. The scars of conquest become the lines of culture. For centuries, kings will rule, and faith will guide them, sometimes as ally, sometimes as rival. The church crowns them, counsels them, and sometimes curses them. From candle-lit monasteries come not only prayers, but knowledge, manuscripts, maps, and the slow awakening of intellect. Outside those stone walls, peasants till the land, craftsmen build the towns, and somewhere in the distance, minstrels sing of valor, of honor, of the delicate dance between power and grace. But even in peace, the island's heart beats with quiet tension. Each generation wonders who holds the true crown, the king who rules men, or the cross that claims their souls. It is a question that will echo through centuries, shaping destinies beyond imagining. And yet, as night descends once more, there is calm. The wars of faith, the struggles of kings, they fade into the hush of twilight. In some lonely abbey by the sea, a bell rings the hour of prayer. Its sound drifts across the water, carried by wind and memory. A monk kneels in silence. His lips move in prayer, but his thoughts wander not to heaven, but to home. The candlelight flickers against the stone, and for a moment, he feels the world turning beyond these walls. Empires will rise, he knows. Kings will fall. But this island will remain, steadfast, eternal, kissed by mist and tide. Far to the north, in the highlands where the air smells of pine and rain, clans whisper of independence, of freedom. Far to the west, the Irish hills burn gold beneath the sunset, and their songs tell of pride untouched by conquest. The island is many lands, many hearts, and yet, the crown seeks to bind them all to bring peace through power, faith through force. The centuries that follow will see castles built and burned, treaties made and broken, kings crowned and buried. Each moment, a ripple in the long sea of empire. But here, in the quiet, after the Norman conquest, the story begins to settle. From the blood and the blessing, a new England is born, a realm of parchment and prayer, of sword and scripture. The cross hangs above the crown now, glowing in candlelight, silent but ever present. And though the mists still creep over the moors at night, they no longer hide the island, they cradle it. For in this fragile unity, born of battle and belief, the first true shape of empire begins to dream. As sleep takes you deeper, imagine the old world fading. The sound of the waves grows softer, the fires in the castles dim to embers. The monks' chants fade into the hum of the wind. The island rests once more, not conquered, not free, but becoming. The crown gleams faintly in the dark, the cross glows beside it, and together they wait for a new dawn, and the next chapter in the long lullaby of empire. Chapter 3 sails against the horizon. The sea has always been there, vast, endless, patient. It waits beyond the cliffs, murmuring to itself, whispering stories of faraway lands. For centuries, the island watched it from a distance, content within its green walls. But now, as the age of crowns and crosses softens into dawn, the tide begins to call. Men stand upon the shore and stare into that pale horizon. They feel it, the pull, the promise, not the call of war, but of wonder. What lies beyond? That silver line where sky and water meet? What worlds, what riches, what gods? The island that once fought to unite itself, now dreams of something greater. It is no longer enough to hold the land, the people wish to hold the sea. The harbors fill with ships, small at first, carved from oak and hope. The sails catch the morning wind, billowing like white wings. And so, England begins to breathe outward. It starts quietly, fishermen venturing further, merchants chasing new spices, monks carrying scripture to distant shores. But beneath that gentle motion is something deeper, more restless. The spirit of conquest sleeps lightly and dreams of gold. The first explorers do not know the word empire. They seek trade, faith, adventure. They seek to understand the world and, in doing so, to possess it. Each voyage feels like a prayer and a gamble, cast upon the waves. When they return, they bring stories of islands jeweled with sunlight, of strange tongues and endless forests, of riches beyond imagining. The tales spread through taverns and courts, and soon even the quiet-hearted feel the thrill of distance. The sea, once a boundary, becomes a bridge. But the ocean is not gentle. It tests every man who dares to cross it. Storms rise without warning. Ships vanish into mist, swallowed by waves that know no mercy. Still, the voyages continue. For those who survive, glory awaits and gold, and the favor of kings. The crown begins to listen. Exploration becomes ambition. The realm that once defended its coasts now sends fleets beyond them. Maps are drawn, lines traced upon parchment, elegant curves marking lands that no Englishman has yet seen. Each stroke of ink is both dream and declaration. To the sailors, these maps are more than guides, they are promises. Each name, Calicut, Guinea, Cathay, glows with mystery. Each voyage adds a new chapter to the growing legend of the island across the sea. In London, the air smells of salt and coin. Merchants grow rich on trade, their ships returning heavy with sugar, spices, silk. The world begins to shrink, brought home in barrels and crates, in fabrics that shimmer like sunlight on water. A quiet empire is forming, not by decree, but by desire. And yet, beneath the beauty, shadows gather. The same wind that carries wealth carries whispers of lands taken, of people chained, of faith used as sword and shield. But for now, those truths are far away, buried beneath waves and distance. The island dreams only of glory. The queen who rules now, Elizabeth, bright and unbroken, becomes a symbol of this awakening. Her reign is calm yet fierce, a mirror of the seas her captains conquer. Under her gaze, the navy grows strong, its sails white as purity, its cannons silent. For now, she listens to men like Francis Drake and Walter Raleigh, dreamers, with salt in their veins and ambition in their eyes. They speak of new worlds, of oceans that shimmer with promise, of riches enough to fill 1,000 thrones. And though her heart is measured, she lets them go. For she knows the island's future lies not only upon the land, but upon the water. The sound of hammers fills the docks, wood striking wood, metal singing against metal. Ships rise like cathedral spires, each one a floating prayer to progress. They are beautiful things and dangerous. Each one carries not only men, but the destiny of a nation. When the fleets depart, the shore grows still. Families watch the sails disappear into the mist, their hearts caught between pride and fear. Months will pass before word returns, if it ever does. The sea gives, and the sea takes, but every voyage leaves its mark. In faraway lands, the English flag flutters for the first time. Small forts rise on foreign shores. Trade begins to taste of conquest. The empire is being born not in thunder, but in whispers and waves. The sailors write in journals of skies, unfamiliar, of stars that burn brighter than those at home, of jungles that breathe and oceans that glow. Their words drift back across the sea, turning into legend before they reach the shore. Children fall asleep to these tales of gold and godliness, of monsters and miracles, and so the dream grows. At night, the queen herself walks the halls of her palace and listens to the wind against the windows. Perhaps she hears the same call that stirred the first sailors, that endless murmur of the horizon. Perhaps she too wonders what the island will become when the world opens fully before it. For every discovery is also a change, and change moves slowly but surely, like the tide. The people who once fought only for soil now fight for sky and sea. And in their hearts, something new flickers, a sense of destiny that reaches far beyond their shores. The old wars of the island have quieted. The battles are no longer fought with swords, but with sails. Ships become armies, trade becomes conquest. Every voyage is a silent declaration. We are here, we will remain, we will shape this world. And yet, even in this rising power, there is beauty. The sea itself seems to bless them, calm skies, fair winds, stars that guide their paths. In the stillness between storms, they feel it, the strange peace of purpose, the serenity of being part of something vast. Back home, In quiet villages, life continues as it always has. Fields bloom, bells ring, children chase each other through meadows. Few understand that their small island is beginning to touch every corner of the earth. They sleep beneath the same stars as their ancestors, unaware that their sons now sail beneath new constellations. The empire grows not through thunder, but through persistence, through faith, through trade, through curiosity. And though the world will one day judge it harshly, in this moment, it feels like destiny unfolding. The island that once lay wrapped in mist now stretches its fingers across oceans. It has found its reflection in the waves, bold, restless, unending. Each ship that leaves its shore is a heartbeat, and the sea, the great mirror of heaven, carries those heartbeats to every horizon. The wind sighs, the sails whisper, and beneath it all, the island hums softly to itself, a lullaby of salt and ambition. Soon, the age of discovery will become the age of empire. But tonight, as the moonlight glows on calm water, there is only wonder. No cannons, no crowns, just the endless sound of the sea, and a dream rising slowly into the dawn. And as you drift deeper into rest, imagine those first ships fading into mist, their sails pale as ghosts, their lights flickering like stars. They vanish beyond the horizon, carrying with them the breath of an island that has finally found its voice. The sea sighs, the shore grows quiet, and the world turns softly toward tomorrow. Chapter 4: The Sound of Distant Shores. The world grows larger now. The sea, once a mystery, has become a map of promise. The island that once dreamed in silence now speaks through the wind, its voice carried by sails, its name whispered across oceans. Beyond the horizon, new lands shimmer like mirages beneath the Sunday. The sailors who once gazed at endless water now see forests stretching to the sky, rivers broad as valleys, and people whose faces glow in the firelight of unfamiliar stars. For them, the world has opened vast, living, and full of sound. The ships drift into harbors no Englishman has seen before. Their timbers creak softly as they anchor in still water. The air smells different here, of spice, of fruit, of rain on leaves far broader than any that grow at home. The men step ashore quietly, as though afraid to wake the land itself. They bring gifts and prayers and promises. They bring words the locals do not yet know, words like trade, king, and empire. At first, there is only curiosity, laughter echoes, between those who do not yet understand one another, but find beauty in the attempt. The air hums with exchange of goods, of glances, of dreams. In the early days, the world feels gentle. The island's touch is light, almost reverent. But time has a way of turning wonder into want. And soon, the sound of the sea is joined by another, the quiet march of ambition. In the forests of the Americas, settlers clear small fields beneath vast skies. They build cottages from timber, plant seeds in the soft earth, and look up at the stars that feel both familiar and foreign. The nights are long, and the winds whisper through the trees, like voices ancient, unseen, unyielding. To the sailors and settlers, this feels like the edge of the world. To the island back home, it feels like the beginning of forever. Letters travel slowly across the ocean, carried by ships that follow the same stars again and again. They tell stories of struggle, of discovery, of loneliness. They speak of summers too bright, of winters too long, of strange creatures and endless horizons. And still, more ships come. England listens. The ports grow busier, the harbors alive with motion. Children chase gulls between barrels of spice and sugar. Merchants count coins by candlelight, their ledgers full of foreign names. The sound of the world now hums through London's narrow streets, the chatter of trade, the scent of adventure, the pulse of a nation looking outward. But not all is peace. For every harbor opened, another is claimed. For every handshake, another bond is broken. The empire grows, not only from exploration, but from hunger. A quiet, relentless desire to reach further, to control more, to be more. And yet, in this retelling, there is no anger, no thunder, only the slow tide of inevitability. The world shifts gently, as if it were always meant to be this way. The sea carries the ships outward, and history drifts behind them like a wake. In Africa, the English coast along foreign sands, setting up small posts for trade. The heat there is unlike anything they have known, heavy, patient, eternal. They speak in soft voices, their boots sinking into warm earth. The people they meet are proud, watchful, curious. The exchange begins as it always does, goods, smiles, silence. But behind it all, something deeper stirs. The rhythm of the drums, the pulse of the land, the scent of life itself, it seeps into the hearts of those who came as strangers. The empire may one day take from these places, but in this moment, it is the empire that is changed. It learns, it listens, it becomes something more than an island. It becomes a question of what the world can hold. Farther east, the seas turn warm and blue, the winds thick with spice. India shimmers beneath the sun, vast, intricate, alive. The traders arrive first, carrying silk and gold, learning the names of cities that glitter like jewels. Calicut, Surat, Bombay. They come humbly, at first. They bow, they barter, they build. The British East India Company is born a seed planted in foreign soil. In this gentle retelling, it is not greed that drives them, but fascination. The colors, the scents, the languages, all weave around them like a dream. They write letters home filled with awe. The stars are brighter here. The air itself feels like song. And though history will remember the power and the pain, for now there is only wonder, a sense that the world is infinite, and that humanity too may expand like light through water. Back home, London begins to hum with wealth. Markets fill with coffee, sugar, tobacco, small comforts from faraway lands. Every bite, every sip is a connection, a tether across time and sea. And yet, most who taste them will never see the shores from which they came. The empire grows like a dream unnoticed, almost tender. No trumpet sounds, no drums of war, just the steady beat of the tide, the creak of rope and timber, the sigh of wind through canvas. And within that rhythm, something ancient awakens not just ambition, but belonging. For as the English settle distant lands, those lands begin to settle within England. Words, foods, songs, ideas, they flow back and forth, mingling like rivers at the mouth of the sea. The empire is not yet iron and smoke, it is wind and whisper. Somewhere in the Caribbean, under a sky ablaze with stars, a sailor lies awake on the deck of his ship. The waves rock him gently. He thinks of home, of the cold cliffs, the smell of wet grass, the bells of London at dawn. He wonders if the sea will ever return him there. Around him, the ocean sighs, not cruel, but eternal. In its vastness, he feels both small and infinite. The same stars that guide him now once shone above the mists of ancient Britain. They shone upon tribes, upon kings, upon queens. They shine now upon explorers and dreamers, upon those who stay and those who wander, and they will shine long after empires fade. As the century turns, the island grows quieter, even as its reach expands. Its ships move like shadows across the world, so many that the sun itself seems never to set upon them. But that phrase, that old promise, is not yet spoken. For now, it is only a feeling, a warmth that hums beneath the skin of the age. And in the stillness of night, when the seas are calm and the stars burn low, the world feels smaller not because it has been conquered, but because it has been connected. The same wind that fills the sails of the English ships touches the shores of Africa, the coasts of India, the harbors of the Americas. It carries stories, names, laughter, the threads of a vast, unspoken song. The island listens. It can hear it now, the sound of distant shores, echoing across oceans, calling back to the land that first sent its children into the deep. Perhaps that sound is pride. Perhaps it is warning, perhaps it is both. But for now, it is peace. The wars have quieted, the horizon is wide, the people sleep under new stars, and the empire, still young, dreams of the world it will one day become. The mists that once shrouded the island now drift over faraway lands. They wrap mountains and jungles in the same soft veil that once covered the cliffs of Britain. The dream, that began in silence, now hums across continents. And as the ships return, their hulls heavy with treasure, their decks worn and weathered, the sea greets them with the same calm whisper it gave when they first left. Nothing has changed, and yet, everything has. The sailors step ashore, their eyes full of distance. They have seen the world and brought it home, and in their hearts, the sound of those distant shores will never fade. The island breathes deeply. It no longer feels small. It feels infinite, stretched across the water, bound to every wind, reflected in every tide. The dream of empire has begun, not with conquest, but with curiosity, not with fire, but with wonder. And, as the night settles once more, the waves carry that dream onward softly, endlessly, toward the waiting dawn. Chapter 5. Tea and Timber. The sea no longer feels like a border. It is a road now familiar, trusted, alive. Ships drift upon it like thoughts across a dream, linking lands that were once only whispers on a map. From the misty harbors of London to the warm winds of India, from the forests of the Americas to the islands of the Caribbean, the rhythm of the empire beats quietly beneath the sails. Trade has become its language. Not the shout of soldiers, but the murmur of merchants. Not conquest by sword, but connection by sea. Wood and wool, sugar and spice, tea and timber, the lifeblood of a growing world. In the mornings, London wakes to the scent of the Thames, salt, smoke, and the faint sweetness of foreign things. Carts roll through cobbled streets carrying barrels, crates, and dreams. Dockworkers call to one another in accents born of every corner of the island. Sailors stumble home with stories that sound like songs. And in quiet counting houses, pens scratch across paper, turning oceans into numbers. It is the age of trade, and trade is the softest form of empire. It moves unseen, beneath banners, and beyond borders, weaving its threads through the lives of those who never meant to rule. The empire does not march now, it drifts. It expands not by battlefields, but by bargains, promises sealed with wax and trust. In distant lands, the story feels different. On the coasts of India, English forts rise beside palm trees. They are small at first, walls of sandstone, flags fluttering in the heat. Inside, merchants sip tea and speak of home. They write letters by candlelight, their ink blurring in the heavy air. Outside, the markets bloom with color silks, spices, the scent of cardamom and rain. Voices rise and fall like music. Here, the world feels endless. The British learn from those they meet. They wear lighter cloth, eat different foods, learn the rhythms of the monsoon. The empire, still young, listens more than it speaks. It takes and it trades, it copies and it changes. It becomes something new, not quite one land, not quite another. Across the Atlantic, the story deepens. The colonies in the Americas grow towns built of timber, roads lined with lanterns, fields spreading beneath vast blue skies. At night, the settlers sit by their fires and speak softly of home. The ocean between them and England feels both infinite and fragile. Every letter, every ship, every word is a thread that keeps them bound. The forests of the New World give timber for ships, the plantations, sugar for tea, the ports, wealth for the island across the sea. Each exchange tightens the weave of empire, a tapestry growing larger, softer, stronger. Back in London, tea has become more than a drink. It is ritual, comfort, symbol. It warms the hands of merchants and monarchs alike. Steam curls above porcelain cups, carrying the scent of distant fields and labor unseen. No one says it aloud, but everyone knows every sip connects them to something vast. The city hums with quiet power. From the docks to the drawing rooms, every sound is a note in the same song, a lullaby of commerce, a rhythm of prosperity. The clatter of wheels on cobblestones, the call of gulls, the tolling of church bells, together they form the heartbeat of an empire, still finding its voice. But not all who build it share in its comfort. In the shadows of its success, others labor unseen, unheard. Men cut timber until their hands bleed. Women spin cloth until their fingers blister. And far away, on distant shores, others toil beneath the sun, their sweat turned into wealth across the sea. The empire's beauty is not without its cost, though few yet see it clearly. Still, for most, life moves gently. The world seems calmer now, safer, more predictable. Trade brings peace, or so it feels. Ships pass one another like swans on the river, exchanging cargo and greetings, carrying more than goods, carrying connection. Evening settles over the Thames. The water glows with reflections of lantern light. The air smells of salt, smoke, and promise. From the tower windows of Whitehall, the Queen, now Anne, then later others, looks out across her city. She sees the river like a silver thread weaving through her realm, binding all things together. Beyond it lies the world, vast, obedient, and softly alive. The British East India Company, once a humble trader, now rules cities. Governors sit where kings once did. Maps change shape with every contract. And yet, in parlors and drawing rooms, the story is told gently of opportunity, of discovery, of a mission divinely blessed. The language of empire becomes a lullaby, comforting, repetitive, and deeply persuasive. In the shipyards, the scent of timber fills the air. Oak, pine, cedar, each plank shaped by calloused hands, each ship a promise. The craftsmen do not think of empire. They think of wages, of families, of steady work. But their creations, those silent hulls and sturdy masts, will soon carry nations across oceans. Every hammer's strike is an echo that will one day shape the world. At sea, life is measured by stars. Sailors mark their days by wind and wave, their nights by constellations that glimmer like memory. They sing softly as they work songs of home, of lovers waiting, of storms survived. And though their voices fade quickly into the wind, the song of empire grows louder with every voyage. By now, the world feels smaller. A letter from India might arrive in London within months, a crate of sugar within weeks. The idea of distance itself begins to change. What was once unimaginable is now routine. And in this new closeness, the island finds its greatest comfort and its greatest illusion. For the further its ships travel, the more England believes itself eternal. It seems that the tides themselves obey its will. The sun rises on one colony as it sets on another. Trade becomes faith, commerce becomes destiny. The empire is no longer a dream, it is a rhythm. And yet, the sea keeps its secrets. Beneath the calm, there are currents deep, unseen, unstoppable. They carry both wealth and warning. Empires, like tides, rise and fall. But for now, in this quiet moment of prosperity, the world seems still. A merchant stands by his window at dusk. He holds a cup of tea, its warmth seeping into his fingers. Outside, the street glows gold in the fading light. He thinks of ships sailing under stars, of men working in faraway heat, of fortunes made and lost upon the waves. He feels both pride and unease, though he cannot name why. He raises the cup to his lips and drinks deeply. The tea is bitter, but he smiles. Far away, a sailor watches the same sunset over a grade, different shore. He too holds a cup, chipped and cracked, filled with the same dark brew. He drinks and thinks of home. The taste brings him peace. The wind carries both their sighs, mingling them in the vastness between worlds. The empire hums quietly, content. The streets of London glimmer. The docks rest beneath moonlight. The ships, anchored and waiting, sway gently in the tide. The world is wide, but for the first time, it feels connected. The threads of tea and timber, of silk and salt, bind the continents like a woven dream. And in the heart of it all, the island sleeps its dreams, filled with sails and stars, its breath steady with the rhythm of trade. For now, there is no war, no fall, no sorrow, only the soft murmur of prosperity, the rustle of leaves in distant plantations, the creak of ships resting on calm water. Tomorrow the tides will change, but tonight the empire breathes easily. It has found its song, the sound of wind in canvas, the scent of spice in air, the quiet promise of tea and timber. And as the stars rise above the Thames, the island, once small and shrouded in mist, glows with a calm, golden light, a beacon upon the water, singing softly to the world it has begun to claim. Chapter 6: The Jewel of the East. The sea grows warmer as the ships drift east. The wind smells of spice and rain. The waves glow like molten glass beneath the Sunday. For weeks, the sails have whispered across the horizon, following stars older than memory. Then, at last, a shape appears. Land rising from mist, green and gold, shining in the dawn. India. To the sailors, it feels like another world, vast, perfumed, alive. Palms sway above bright harbors. Temple bells echo across the water. The markets hum like beehives, filled with color and motion. Here, even silence seems to shimmer. The traders step ashore cautiously, their boots sinking into sand that burns beneath their soles. They speak softly, smile often, gesture more than they understand. The air presses close, heavy with jasmine and dust. Every breath feels like discovery. At first, they come as guests. Chapter 6: The Jewel of the East. The sea grows warmer as the ships drift east. The air changes thicker, slower, fragrant with spice and wind-borne rain. The gulls that once followed the ships have vanished, replaced by strange birds that cry like flutes in the dawn. Weeks of sailing end in a shimmer of gold upon the horizon. Then, through the haze, the coast of India appears: green hills, palm trees, and rivers broad as dreams. To the sailors who first see it, the sight is almost holy. They have crossed half the world, and it feels as though they have sailed into another sky entirely. The sun burns higher here, round and red. The light dances on the water like fireflies. And on the shore, cities bloom bright and endless, breathing with life. When they step ashore, they do so softly, almost reverently. The ground beneath their boots is warm, and the air smells of incense, fruit, and smoke. Crowds gather to see them. Traders, monks, children. Eyes meet eyes, and for a moment, both sides stare, not in fear, but in wonder. The English bring cloth and silver. They come seeking silk, saltpeter, tea, and jewels. But they find something they did not expect: a civilization older than their own, vast and intricate, full of beauty and contradiction. Here, palaces rise from gardens. Here, the rivers are worshipped as gods. Every color seems brighter, every sound deeper. Even the air itself feels alive. At first, they come humbly. They build small trading posts along the coast, at Surat, Madras, Bombay, Calcutta. Wooden walls, a flag, a few cannons. Not fortresses, not yet merely footholds of curiosity. Inside, merchants sit by candlelight, writing in ledgers, their ink smudged by sweat. Outside, the markets hum with languages they cannot yet name. Days blur into months, months into years. The English learn the rhythms of the monsoon, the still air before the rain, the crash of water against tiled roofs, the hush that follows. They grow used to the heat, the scents, the endless songs of evening. India changes them quietly. They begin to wear cotton instead of wool, to drink tea instead of ale, to dream in color. For a time, the exchange feels balanced, trade for trade, courtesy for courtesy. The Mughal emperors rule vast kingdoms, and the English traders bow deeply before them. They are guests here, tolerated and watched. Their letters home speak of wonder, of cities that glow like embers at dusk, of nights filled with music that never ends. But the sea is patient, and so is ambition. The small trading company begins to grow. More ships arrive, more warehouses, more soldiers hired to protect the merchants' interests. The East India Company, born from curiosity, slowly becomes a power unto itself. Its ledgers grow thicker, its walls taller. Its men begin to speak not of trading with India, but of ruling parts of it. Still, for now, the transformation is quiet. The empire's footsteps are soft. Paper, not swords, shape this new dominion. Contracts replace crowns, signatures replace armies. And yet, beneath the calm surface, the tide begins to turn. The British learn to govern by learning to adapt. They study the customs, the languages, the laws. They hire local scribes, soldiers, interpreters. And in return, they offer what they believe is order: roads, ports, and coin. To many, this seems progress. To others, intrusion. But history, as always, moves forward gently, even when it does not move kindly. In London, the stories arrive in fragments, tales of elephants and emeralds, of silk that gleams like moonlight, of spices that scent the air for miles. Poets write of the East as paradise. Merchants speak of it as fortune. The island dreams of it as destiny. Back in India, the company's flag now flies from coastal forts. Its soldiers march through narrow streets at dusk, their boots echoing against stone. The sound blends with the distant call of prayer, with the song of crickets, with the hum of the bazaar. The empire, here, feels almost invisible, a shadow stretching across the land, touching everything and claiming nothing. Yet, for all its reach, it cannot change the soul of the place. Temples still glow in the morning light. Children still chase kites in the dust. In the markets, traders laugh, women bargain, and life moves on, eternal and unbroken. The land absorbs everything, the languages, the customs, the presence of strangers, and remains itself. As years pass, both worlds begin to blend. The British build bungalows with verandas, shaded by neem trees. They learn to rest in the afternoon heat, to listen to the rain. Some marry here, raise children who speak two tongues, dream two dreams. The empire becomes not just a boundary, but a bond complex, fragile, human. Yet time deepens the divide as much as it bridges it. Wealth flows one way, from east to west. Ships leave the ports of India heavy with cotton, opium, and tea, and return filled with soldiers, laws, and control. The song of trade slowly turns into the hum of empire. Still, the story here is not only one of taking, it is one of meeting, of two vast worlds, learning one another, slowly, imperfectly. The English bring their machines, their manners, their sense of rule. India offers color, rhythm, thought, a beauty so immense it changes those who try to contain it. Each side alters the other, even when it does not mean to. The poets of England begin to write of heat and dust, of rivers that shimmer like mirrors, of a land where the air itself seems to dream. The empire has begun to seep into the imagination of its creators. What was once foreign becomes familiar. What was once distance becomes reflection. They start to see themselves in the lands they rule, and perhaps, unknowingly, lose a part of who they were. In the stillness of evening, when the sun sinks into the Ganges and the sky turns the color of copper, the world seems to hold its breath. A soldier leans on his musket, staring at the glow over the river. He thinks of home of fog and frost, of the gray cliffs of Dover. The sound of distant temple bells mingles with the memory of church choirs. He feels, for the first time, how far he has come and how far he has drifted. He is not alone. Across the empire, men and women live suspended between worlds. They belong to both and to neither. They write letters they cannot send, speak languages they cannot translate, dream of skies that no longer feel their own. The empire is no longer just a map. It is a feeling, soft and heavy, like the air before rain. And still, in London, the lights burn late. The ships keep sailing, the ledgers keep filling, the dream keeps growing. No one yet sees how vast it will become, or how fragile. For now, it feels eternal, a balance of trade and trust, of profit and peace. The British call India the jewel of the East, not for its wealth alone, but for its wonder, its beauty, its reflection of everything they wish to be. They see in it both their triumph and their temptation. It dazzles them, changes them, defines them. But as with all jewels, there is a cost. The brighter it shines, the deeper the shadows behind it grow. And somewhere within those shadows, a new story is waiting. A story of voices that will one day rise, soft at first, then strong. For now, though, the world sleeps. The rivers flow quietly to the sea. The monsoon hums against the windows. The empire rests in its golden light, unaware of the storms to come. The sails are furled, the ports are calm, and the jewel of the East glows softly beneath the moon. Beautiful, eternal, and dreaming. Chapter 7. Echoes of Africa. The sea turns darker as the ships sail south. The air thickens, heavy with salt and heat. The horizon burns gold at dawn and bruised purple at dusk, a sky vast enough to swallow thought. The sailors watch in silence as the coastline comes into view, green and shadowed, stretching endlessly, ancient as the wind itself. Africa, a word that, to the islanders, once meant only mystery. Now it means something more: trade, connection, and a quiet sense of destiny. They come ashore not with armies, but with cargo, gifts, and cautious curiosity. The waves lap softly at the hulls of their ships as they anchor in foreign bays. The beaches are wide, white with sand, and Sunday villages shimmer in the heat, their thatched roofs glinting like mirrors. The air hums with the sound of insects, and drums slow, deep, rhythmic, as though the earth itself has a heartbeat. For those who have spent months at sea, this place feels alive in a way that words cannot hold. The traders step onto the shore and are met by faces both wary and welcoming. The languages are many, but trade has its own tongue gestures, offerings, patience. They exchange cloth for gold, beads for ivory, iron for salt. Each deal is a moment suspended in trust and uncertainty. And yet, beneath it all, the empire listens quietly, calculating. In these early years, the encounters seem simple. The English see opportunity, a chance to connect the world, to bring wealth and purpose across oceans. They tell themselves they are explorers, merchants, messengers of civilization. They look upon the land with awe, its rivers vast, its forests endless, its people proud. But the sea is never silent. It whispers, even when calm. And beneath the whispers, another rhythm grows, the slow, sorrowful pulse of something darker. The trade that began with ivory and gold soon turns toward lives. At first it feels distant, a transaction, a number, a necessity of the age. But the truth is heavier than any cargo. Ships that once carried spices now carry chains. The docks that rang with laughter now echo with silence. The ocean that brought discovery now carries grief. The men who sail those routes do not speak of what they see. They return home with wealth and guilt tangled together, telling themselves that the world demands progress, that it is beyond their choosing. But the sea remembers. It carries the cries, the echoes, the sorrow of those who crossed unwillingly. Every wave that touches the English shore carries a memory of the others of Africa, of loss, of endurance. Still, the empire grows. In London, the merchants count their coins. The coffee houses buzz with talk of new markets, new ventures, new horizons. The people drink sweetened tea, unaware of the bitter cost behind its sweetness. The music of the docks drowns out the silence of conscience. And yet, even in those days, not all hearts are deaf. There are voices, faint at first, that speak of mercy, of justice, of what is right. Preachers and poets begin to question what progress truly means. The empire listens, though it does not yet answer. Far away, on the African coast, the rhythms of life continue. Children laugh in the surf. Fishermen push their boats into dawn-lit waves. The land is not broken. It endures, as it always has. Empires pass, but the earth remains. The British build forts along the shore. Small, square, sturdy. Their walls are pale against the green hills. From their parapets, men look out at the endless horizon, watching for ships, for storms, for signs of home. They do not know that their names will fade, that their empires will turn to dust. But the sea knows. It always knows. There are moments of kindness amid the weight of history, small gestures that survive in memory. A sailor who learns the language of the local traders. A woman who gives food to strangers. A boy who listens to the sea and dreams of a world without chains. These moments do not undo the wrongs, but they remind us that even within empire, humanity breathes. As the decades pass, the tide of time shifts again. The very ships that once carried sorrow will, one day, carry hope. The same harbors that saw darkness will witness its end. The voices calling for freedom will grow louder, stronger, unstoppable. But that time has not yet come. For now, the world lies in uneasy peace. The empire prospers. The ports are busy. The maps expand. The traders return home with stories that blur truth and myth. Tales of jungles so green they seem unreal, of animals that walk like gods, of music that sounds like rain. They speak of Africa with both awe and fear, as if the land itself has a soul too vast to understand. And perhaps it does. Perhaps that is why, even centuries later, its echo still haunts the dreams of those who crossed its shores. The drums that once greeted the English ships have never truly stopped. They beat softly beneath history's noise, a reminder of what was taken and what endured. In the stillness of the African night, the stars blaze brighter than anywhere else on Earth. The constellations that once guided explorers now watch silently, unchanged, untamed. The ocean glows under moonlight, calm on the surface, infinite beneath. A single wave touches the sand, retreats, and returns again, endless, forgiving. A sailor sits by a small fire near the fort. He listens to the hum of the forest and the faraway drums. He feels both pride and unease, though he cannot name why. He knows that he is part of something larger than himself, something that will live long after he is gone, both its glory and its guilt. He looks up at the stars and thinks of home, of rain against the window, of the bells of London, of his mother's hands. He wonders if the people there can hear what he hears now, the heartbeat of a continent, steady and ancient, echoing across the sea. In the distance, a ship's bell rings. The tide begins to turn. The sails will rise with the morning light, and the ocean will once again carry its burden of trade, of time, of memory. Africa recedes behind them as the ships move northward again, but the sound remains soft, rhythmic, eternal. It is the sound of the world breathing, of history remembering. It is the echo of Africa, a whisper that will follow the empire forever. And as the sails catch the wind, and the sea folds around the keels like silk, the island across the world sleeps, unaware of the shadow it has cast upon the tide. For now, there is stillness, the calm between what has been done and what will be undone. The ships fade into mist. The horizon closes behind them. Only the waves remain, whispering to the shore, carrying the echoes of Africa's sorrow, endurance, and the soft promise of redemption yet to come. Chapter 8. The Crimson Map. The world is wide now, and the sea is no longer enough to hold the island's dream. Across parchment and globe, the red of empire begins to bloom. Soft at first, like spilled ink, then deeper, spreading along coastlines and rivers, tracing the shape of an ambition that seems endless. In London, cartographers bend over their desks by candlelight. Each stroke of their quills turns distance into certainty. They draw mountains they have never seen, jungles they cannot imagine, and seas they will never sail. Yet the maps feel alive, pulsing beneath their fingertips. Wherever the crimson color touches, a story begins. To the people of the island, these maps are proof that the world can be known. To the sailors, they are promises. To the merchants, pathways. To the rulers, proof of greatness. And so the island, once wrapped in mist, finds itself at the center of everything, its name written in the corners of every continent. The empire's presence grows not through thunder but through routine. Ships depart and return. Ports swell with goods. Cities hum with trade. The crimson map glows in classrooms and council halls. Children trace the red lines with their fingers and learn that this color means home, even when it lies oceans away. But maps tell only part of the story. Beyond their borders are people, millions of lives, each with their own histories, languages, and songs. In India, the British flag flutters above palaces and bazaars. In Africa, forts gleam beside the sand. In the Caribbean, sugar fields stretch to the horizon beneath a punishing Sunday. Everywhere, the empire breathes in the rhythm of others, taking and giving, binding and dividing. For now, the story is told in calm voices. Parliament debates expansion with measured words. Explorers write journals filled with wonder. Poets describe distant sunsets as though they were England's own. The empire believes itself benevolent, carrying law, language, and order to the edges of the world. Yet even in the quiet retelling, a listener can hear another sound beneath the surface. The slow, inevitable sigh of those who must bear its weight. Still, the world seems peaceful. The ships move like clockwork. The trade routes hum like arteries. Tea from Assam, cotton from Bengal, gold from the Cape, timber from Canada, each item a thread in the same vast fabric. London glows with gaslight, its streets alive with every accent of the world. The empire's heart beats steady and slow. Across the seas, governors and generals write letters home, describing their stations in gentle tones. They speak of heat and rain, of loyal subjects and orderly rule. They build railways and schools, gardens and clubs. They believe or wish to believe that they are improving the lands they rule. History will judge them differently, but tonight, beneath the stars, they sleep in that certainty. In small villages under foreign skies, life goes on. Children chase each other through dusty streets. Traders open their stalls at dawn, filling the air with spice and laughter. Priests ring bells. Farmers till the soil. The empire may stretch across their lives, but the human heart still beats to its own rhythm, unchanged, unbroken. For every banner raised, there are those who resist quietly. A poet writes in secret. A farmer hides his harvest from the tax collector. A mother teaches her child the old words, refusing to let them fade. Their defiance is gentle, but it endures longer than steel. Back in Britain, pride swells with each new territory. Victorian houses fill with souvenirs, ivory carvings, silk fans, shells polished by foreign hands. Evening newspapers print tales of discovery and duty. The crimson map becomes a comfort, proof that the island's reach is endless, its destiny divine. Few notice how red begins to look like blood when the lamplight hits it just right. Still, this is an age of faith in progress. Steamships cut across oceans. Telegraph wires hum beneath the waves. A message that once took months to travel can now cross the world in moments. Empire becomes not just geography, but time itself, a constant present, stretching from pole to pole. Yet in the stillness between the wires' pulses, another truth flickers. The empire is fragile, bound by distance and denial. Each colony holds its own storms, each culture its own memory of freedom. And though rebellion sleeps, it dreams restlessly. Far away, in a quiet barracks at the edge of the desert, a young soldier writes to his family. He tells them of stars that burn like fire, of nights filled with drumming wind. He writes of the kindness of strangers, of the loneliness that follows. He does not speak of fear, but it lingers between the lines. He folds the letter carefully and seals it with wax, as if to keep his doubts inside. Another letter travels the opposite way from a scholar in Calcutta to a friend in Oxford. He writes of books and languages, of the strange meeting of East and West. He thanks the British for bringing learning, but wonders quietly what they have taken in return. He writes, "Perhaps we are all becoming something new, neither yours nor ours, but both forever changed." His ink fades before it reaches the island, but his thought remains. The empire is not a single story. It is 1,000 voices speaking at once. Some sing of pride, others of loss, many of both. And in this chorus, there is beauty, the beauty of connection, of cultures colliding and reshaping one another. There is also sorrow, the cost of power, the weight of history. Together they make the sound of the age, a soft hum that carries across continents like the wind over open water. By the late century, the crimson map covers a quarter of the earth. Upon this empire, a minister declares, the sun never sets. And indeed, somewhere at every hour, the British flag moves in the light, rising in Hong Kong, glowing over the Nile, fading into dusk above the Caribbean. To many, this feels eternal. To a few, it feels like the calm before a storm. But for this moment, the world rests. The oceans glimmer under moonlight, the cities hum like distant beehives. From London to Lagos, from Melbourne to Montreal, the same moon watches over them all. It glows upon the red of the maps, softening it to pink, almost gentle. For all its reach, the empire is still small beneath the sky. In drawing rooms and barracks, aboard ships and in temples, people sleep. They dream of home, of journeys, of futures yet to come. The empire, too, dreams of permanence, of glory, of order that will last forever. It does not yet know that every empire dreams the same dream, and that all awaken, one day, to morning. For now, the world is still. The maps lie folded on the desks of tired clerks. The ink dries, the candles burn low, and in that fragile silence, the empire glows not with fire, but with reflection. 1,000 lights flicker across its surface, each one a heartbeat, a story, a life. The sea sighs against the shores of every continent it touches, and the Rapa Island, far away, listens in its sleep. It hears the echo of its own creation, mist becoming wind, wind becoming wave, wave becoming world. The crimson map rests on the table, its edges curling, its colors deepening with age. Soon, those edges will begin to fade. But tonight, it lies perfect and complete, a dream made visible. And as the stars turn slowly above, the empire breathes in the darkness, a vast, quiet creature suspended between pride and peace. The world sleeps beneath its shadow, and history waits for the dawn. Chapter 9: Engines and Empires. Morning rises not in birdsong but in steam. Where once the island woke to the hush of tide and the creak of timber, now a new rhythm rolls across the valleys, a low, even thrum, as if the earth has learned to breathe through iron lungs. Chimneys are the new spires, and the first pale smoke of day unfurls like prayer. Coal black as midnight, bright as noon when burned, has found its way from the deep seams of the island into the heart of every hour. Fire feeds water, water becomes motion, motion becomes the music of an age. England, which once measured distance by the length of a day's walk and the patience of a horse, begins to fold itself inward. Places that used to be far become neighbors. Canals are cut through quiet fields, straight as thoughts. Barges slide along mirror-still water, carrying cotton and grain, timber and ore. Men walk beside them with hands in their pockets, whistling almost absent-mindedly, as if even this choreographed water, obedient load, were only the beginning. In low brick mills, windows without curtains face the gray sky. Inside, rows of machines hum with tireless, tidy hunger, pulling thread from fluff, weaving cloth from wind. The floorboards tremble softly, belts whisper over wheels, iron teeth make patient work of what once took a winter to do by hand. The women and men who tend them move like metronomes, measured by the machine yet measuring the machine in turn, listening for a skip, a snag, a little wrongness that the eye catches before the hand does. They are not soldiers, they are keepers of a new kind of fire. At dawn, the streets of towns that were once villages fill as if the tide itself had risen with people. Cloth caps and shawls, pails of tea, shoes worn thin. Children trot to the doors of work like they used to the doors of school. The bell that calls them no longer belongs to a chapel, but to a factory. Mothers lace boots, fathers check pockets, and the day folds them all into itself. This is not a trumpet age, it is a piston age. Up, down, up, down. Endurance turned into prosperity, breath turned into coin. In Manchester, rain falls across a forest of chimneys and gives the air a sheen that almost looks kind. In Birmingham, sparks leap from anvils like brief stars and vanish before the eye can feel them. In Newcastle, iron rails shine wet and sweet as licorice, and ships along the Tyne seem to move without wind, their hearts thudding under decks no sail ever knew. In London, streets grow dense with shops selling anything the eye might want. Bolts of calico smooth as river light, kettles that gleam like captured moons, pocket watches that turn seconds into property. The island's old map, the one of hedges and green lanes, of muddy paths and patient inns, begins to blur. A new geometry lays itself upon the land. Straight lines of iron that do not hesitate, stations like doorways into elsewhere. The first locomotives are loud to those who love silence, and beautiful to those who love speed. They breathe like animals, snort like tired oxen, steam like boiling tea. Children run alongside the embankments, waving. Dogs bark with complicated feelings. Farmers pause, leaning on gates, and narrow their eyes, trying to decide whether the country has come apart or come together. What the sea did for empire, the rail will do for the island itself. The day expands in both directions. You can leave a town in morning fog and sit to supper under a different sky. Newspapers no longer arrive like weather unpredictable, old on arrival, but like news. The telegraph, a wire running beneath thought, begins to stitch the empire with electricity. The world speaks in dots and dashes, and distance falls silent a little more each year. There is a kind of mercy in this, felt in pockets and pantries. Bread grows surer, cloth cheaper, coal more within reach. Families warm, rooms that used to be cold. A winter that once was a season can, with careful hoarding, be reduced to a couple of weeks of worry. But there is also a new kind of tiredness that sleep does not always cure, a fatigue that rises from the mind as much as from the hands. Night shifts fill the dark with work. Morning shifts have no dawn. Time, which once bent to the sun, bends now to the whistle. And yet, even in this rule of iron, there is wonder. Engineers stand in raincoats along embankments and look upon the bridges they have thrown across rivers with a quiet astonishment. They have stitched two hills together with a single thought. In the shipyards, men plate a hull with rivet after rivet, and then the keel meets water and the river lifts the thing as if it were always meant to float. A door opens in the mind. If this can be done, what else can be done? The empire, listening, grows a second heartbeat. The first is the tide, outward and back, as ships make the world small. The second is the machine, steady, exact, and endless, as mills spin the world into cloth and rails roll it into reach. In India, cotton blooms and is picked beneath a sun whose heat the Lancashire looms will never feel. The bales cross oceans in the holds of steamers. The mill windows fog on winter mornings in towns that have learned to dream of monsoons without having seen rain that warm. Cloth leaves England like a season, drapes, shoulders in markets whose songs are older than machines. The return cargo is not just money but meaning. The island now thinks of itself not only as a place, but as a system. There are costs, whispered more than spoken. Coal dust finds lungs that cannot refuse it. Fingers that should be learning letters, learn threads, knots, emergency stops. The river that once carried trout now carries dye. Geese land in water that does not feel like water anymore. Still, in kitchens with new stoves and on tables with new plates, gratitude and unease sit together. This is the price of engines, blessing and burden in the same parcel. The city grows a new weather. Fog, swollen with smoke, lowers like wool pulled over the eyes, and lamplighters become navigators, dotting streets with little suns. In those lights, faces pass clerks with ink under their nails, machinists with iron embedded fine in their skin, seamstresses with pinpricks in their thumbs, scientists with chalk on their sleeves. The age is not only mills, it is mines. Lectures fill halls, societies form, with names that sound like oaths to the future. Laws begin to lean toward care, shorter hours, safer stairs, a little more daylight where once there was none. Philanthropy walks beside profit in uneasy company, each peeking at the other's tally. In drawing rooms, there is talk of progress as if it were a virtue, and of civilization as if it were a railway timetable. In pubs, men parse the wage down to the penny, the pint down to the minute before shift. In churches, sermons meet the machine with parables about time and toil, about Sabbath and speed. Everyone is practicing a new faith and does not know its creed yet. Perhaps it is simply this, that the future can be made, that it is not a shore, but a workshop. The island's old industries do not vanish, they are absorbed. Weaving becomes machinery, shipbuilding becomes metallurgy, farming becomes chemistry. Even the countryside is edited. Hedgerows trimmed to the rail's needs, fields plotted around pylons and chimneys, as if the land were making room for the city's breath. And, yet, the lark still rises. The sheep still worry the grass. A child on a stile will still stop to watch a cloud and think it a ship. The new does not abolish the old, it rests upon it. Abroad, engines turn empire into schedule. Steam replaces the hesitations of wind. Mail arrives with a regularity that feels like law. Telegraph offices glow like miniature lighthouses inland, blinking the world into one. Administrators write rules whose certainty presumes a day without weather. And from this certainty comes both comfort and conceit. If a timetable can master 10 stations, why not 10 provinces? If a signal can govern a junction, why not a people? These are quiet thoughts, unboastful, almost tidy, and they carry with them the weight of a new kind of power. And yet, resistance adapts too. A petition travels faster. A meeting can be called in a morning and attended by night. Ideas that once needed ships now need paper and wire. If engines teach obedience, they also teach organization. A worker's grief becomes a union's demand. A village rumor becomes a newspaper's headline. A colony's murmur becomes a movement's proclamation. Empires mistake their own networks for ownership. The world uses those same lines to speak back. At a station after dark, a porter, bone-tired, pauses by a pile of trunks. Steam drifts across lamplight in sheets. The rails tick softly as metal cools. He closes his eyes and hears all the day's departures at once. The squeal of wheels, the quick farewells, the clatter of milk churns, the punch of a ticket canceling and creating a journey in the same gesture. When he opens them, the platform is empty and very gentle, like a church that has just finished choir. He has seen the empire pass through his hands in parcels, and parcels do not sing, yet he knows he is part of a song. In a mill, a girl leans to tie a thread, her breath held so the break won't spread. She has a poem half remembered from school in her head and hums it to keep the rhythm. The day is long, but she knows the week ends, and she will stand on the canal and watch the water not working and feel something in her ease. She wonders what exists beyond the town her feet know. The train, she has been told, will take her. The train, she has been told, can take anyone anywhere. A clerk at a telegraph desk plays his instrument with 2 fingers and a patience he never needs for pen and ink. Messages blink through him like swallows through a barn. Births, deaths, shipments, warnings, love. He is anonymous and essential. He goes home in the fog and hears in the tick of the mantel clock a distant echo of his day. Time, made into message, message, made into meaning. Engines and empires, Two words that sound like iron when spoken together. And yet in this telling, they are soft, because night has a way of gentling even the hardest words. The machines do not stop, but they quiet. The last freight slips in under a lid of stars. The mills release their workers into streets that smell of rain. Windows across the city brighten and darken, as if the town itself is blinking awake and asleep at once. There is pride in what has been built, and there is caution. The island knows, faintly, that it has placed its weight upon a lattice that must be tended. One broken bridge halts a county. One failed bank stops a dozen wheels. One winter of strikes teaches patience like a stern tutor. The age of engines is not a march, it is a balance. The line must be true. The boiler watched. The brake trusted. The hand steady. Beyond Britain's shores, steamships trail smoke across seas that used to hold only cloud. The routes between colonies grow not only faster but more regular, and regularity becomes a habit, and habit becomes an expectation, and expectation becomes a right. People begin to live as if tomorrow were knowable, and sometimes it is. But sometimes a storm rises, or a war begins, or a market turns, and the island remembers engines are clever, not sovereign. Tonight, the rain taps lightly at factory panes and runs down in vertical rivers, turning oily soot into shy, clean beads that gather at the sill. Someone sweeps a floor that will dirty again by morning. Someone checks a gauge that will be checked by someone else at midnight. In the quiet houses of those who give their days to machines, breaths slow and deepen. The body forgives the body. Sleep obeys no whistle. If you listen closely as you drift, you can hear it, the great composite lullaby of the age. Wheels turning under mountains, pumps thudding in ships, clocks answering one another across parishes, cats stepping lightly along yard walls, a single late tram whisking by with an empty bell. All of it is motion, and all of it is mercy. The promise that what a hand makes might journey farther than the hand could ever go. Soon, the century will put a crown upon this labor, gilding industry with ceremony, draping steam in velvet. A queen will become symbol and shelter, and the red map will seem to float over a forest of smokestacks as if both were one fabric. But before the banners, before the elan, remember this: the empire that claimed oceans now claims ours, and the hours answer. They fall into rows like stitches, like rails, like columns of figures that to the right mind spell not just profit, but poetry. The night deepens. The last coal falls through the grate with a sound like a sigh. Somewhere, a watchman on a mill's top landing looks over a town made of roof lines and smoke and wet slate and feels the wind turn, and he knows by that small change that tomorrow's weather will be kinder. He pulls his coat close and smiles at nothing in particular, which is to say, at everything. The engines below him continue their small, necessary breaths. He is guardian of their sleep, and you too may rest. The age will keep. The rails are true for now, the boilers banked, the wires quiet. The empire, that enormous, intricate loom, has rise, woven another day and laid it down, warm and weighty, upon the island's knees. In the morning, the whistles will wake the fields, and smoke will lift like banners, and 1,000 doors will open into labor and hope. But not yet. For now, let the engines murmur, let the rivers forget their burdens, let the clocks consent to be only time. Close your eyes. The island that once was mist is iron now, but iron can sing as gently as fog if you let it. Breathe with it, in, out, pistons, tides, engines, and empires, turning beneath the stars. Chapter 10. The Queen and the World. The century unfolds like silk. The smoke of engines softens, and from the mist of progress emerges a single figure, a queen, small in stature, immense in symbol. Her crown glints beneath gray English skies, yet its reflection reaches every horizon. Under her gaze, the island steadies itself. The empire, restless and young, learns to breathe in rhythm with her calm. Victoria. Her name becomes both prayer and promise. The people speak it with affection, sometimes with awe, sometimes with the quiet fatigue of devotion. To them, she is the mother of an age not distant, not divine, but human enough to grieve, steadfast enough to endure. The bells of Westminster ring her reign into being. Across the sea, cannon fire marks the same moment, echoing in colonies half a world away. From that instant, the empire becomes a mirror, her reflection on every coin, her portrait in every hall, her presence stitched into the fabric of a world grown vast and vivid. In London, the streets bloom with industry and pride. Horse-drawn carriages rattle beside iron trams. Lamplight spills across polished shop windows. Children press their noses to the glass, staring at toys carved in India, silk from China, sugar from the Caribbean. The empire has become visible, tangible, not an idea now, but an object that can be held in one's hand. Yet the Queen herself remains still. Within the walls of Buckingham Palace, she writes letters to ministers, to daughters, to monarchs abroad. Her handwriting is precise, unhurried. She believes, as so many do, that duty is the purest form of love. Outside her windows, the empire hums like a distant organ, a sound too large for any one ear to hear completely. The red map spreads wider still. Steamships make the oceans seem smaller. Railways lace the continents. Telegraph wires bind the world in silver thread. A message can cross from London to Lahore before a candle burns to its end. It feels miraculous, the world speaking to itself for the first time. But with every message comes its shadow. For each word of triumph, there are whispers of unrest. For each act of charity, a quiet reckoning of cost. The empire glitters, but beneath the polish, fatigue begins to show. It is too vast now, too heavy to hold without trembling. The Queen senses it, though she does not name it. She wears the crown as she wears her grief quietly, completely. When her beloved Albert dies, the nation mourns with her. The gaslights burn lower, the great halls hang their mirrors in black. For years, she vanishes from public life, and the empire waits in reverent stillness. Yet even in absence, she reigns her sorrow, becoming the empire's own. People speak of her as though she were a star veiled by cloud, unseen but unforgotten. When she returns, it is with gentleness, not grandeur. Her hair has silvered, her voice is softer. The world greets her not with drums, but with tears of relief. Under her, Britain has become something different. Not just an island, not just a nation, but a network of hearts and histories intertwined across oceans. In India, they hold celebrations in her honor, processions of elephants and flowers, banners bright as sunrise. In Africa, traders raise their glasses to her name. In Canada, school children recite oaths of loyalty. Everywhere, her face is known. To some, it means protection. To others, power. To all, it means Britain. Yet even in the height of glory, a quiet question begins to hum beneath the pride. How long can this last? How far can one island's dream stretch before it begins to fray? In drawing rooms and parlors, men speak of expansion as if it were destiny, while poets begin to wonder what might lie beyond it, what it means to be both ruler and ruled, conqueror and caretaker. Newspapers print stories of faraway wars in soft language, turning conflict into adventure, tragedy into tale. The empire learns how to tell its own story, and in doing so, begins to forget that others have their own. Still, the age of the Queen feels peaceful. There is progress everywhere. Hospitals, schools, sanitation, science. The world seems to glow with invention and improvement. To live under her reign feels, to many, like standing in sunlight. Even the poor, who know hardship too well, find comfort in the belief that the age itself is good. At night, the Queen stands at her window, the lamplight gentle against her face. She can see the Thames glimmering below, reflecting the lights of ships from every corner of her realm. Perhaps she thinks of her youth, of the quiet girl who once rode through London crowned and trembling. Perhaps she wonders what her empire has become, and whether, in its grandeur, It still remembers the softness of the island where it began. The years turn. Steam becomes steel. Industry becomes art. The empire flourishes, and with it, so too does unease. Nations within it begin to stir. Softly at first calls for fairness, for voice, for home. The queen reads reports of it, sighs, and folds the papers neatly. She believes in unity. She believes, perhaps too much, in her own gentleness to hold back the tides of change. By the time her jubilee comes, she is old, her face etched with the map of her own reign, lines of love, of duty, of loss. The streets overflow with celebration. Bells ring from every steeple. Bands play through every square. The crimson map waves from banners and bunting. Every continent, every colony, every language of her empire is there, at least in spirit. She smiles, but her eyes are distant. She knows, in the quiet place where all rulers go, that nothing lasts forever. Even the greatest empires are but seasons, bright summers that fade into gentler light. And though her world seems eternal, she feels the autumn already in the air. When she dies, the nation stands still. Trains pause on their tracks. Factories fall silent. For a single hour, even the engines that changed the world seem to hold their breath. It is not just a queen who is gone, it is an era, a certainty, a dream of permanence. The empire mourns as one body, scattered yet united. From the Cape to Calcutta, from Ottawa to Melbourne, black flags flutter against gold skies. The red of the map darkens, not with pride now, but with memory. The Queen's name passes into legend, and the world she shaped sails gently into twilight. But her age remains not in rule or conquest, but in the things that endure, the schools, the bridges, the words, and the belief. Quiet, stubborn, that progress, if guided by care, might one day be kindness. The sea, which carried her empire, returns to calm. The ships drift beneath stars that no flag can claim. And the island that once dreamed of the world now dreams of itself again, smaller, wiser, still beautiful. The Queen sleeps, and with her, the century closes its eyes. The bells fade into distance, and the world exhales, softly, ready for what comes next. Chapter 11. Songs from the Colonies. Night falls over the empire, and for the first time the silence is not complete. It hums faintly, beautifully with distant music. From the Caribbean to Calcutta, from Lagos to London, the winds carry melodies that were never meant to meet, but they do. Across the sea, across time, the world begins to listen to itself. Once, the empire spread through maps and machines. Now it spreads through sound, through song, rhythm, and story. The same ships that once carried timber and tea now carry something lighter, stronger, and more enduring. The voices of 1,000 different worlds. On an island in the West Indies, drums beat softly under the moon. The rhythm rises from hands that have known both labor and freedom. It is not a cry, nor a call to war. It is memory, alive in motion. The drums speak of ancestors, of faith, of loss, of laughter. And as the waves roll toward the horizon, the rhythm travels with them. In London, far away, a musician sits by a window overlooking the river. He cannot sleep. He hears the rain against the glass and the faint echo of something unfamiliar. A beat, a pulse, a music that is not from here, but feels like it belongs. He writes a melody to match it, and without meaning to, creates something new. In India, a singer in a temple begins her morning raga, her voice winding up through the still air like smoke. She sings not to be heard, but to remember. Outside the temple walls, English soldiers stand listening. They do not understand the words, but something in the tone, the rise and fall, the calm power stays with them. Weeks later, one hums it softly on the deck of a ship bound for home. He does not know he is carrying history with him. The empire is vast, but culture travels faster than conquest. It cannot be commanded or confined. It moves like wind, touching everything, changing everyone. Children in Jamaica recite English poems under palm trees. Children in Yorkshire hum Caribbean rhythms in schoolyards without knowing where they came from. Books from Britain fill Indian libraries. Indian stories, retold by English voices, fill the bookshelves of London drawing rooms. The exchange is endless, invisible, and eternal. And in that exchange, something begins to soften. The lines of empire, those hard red borders of power blur. The world, for all its difference, begins to share a single heartbeat. In cafes and clubs across the empire, new music stirs. African drums meet Irish fiddles. Indian flutes meet Scottish bagpipes. Voices merge in languages that were never meant to coexist, and yet, somehow, they do. It is the sound of empire turning into something else, something human. In the quiet hours, after the factories sleep and the ships have docked, you can almost hear it, the hum of distant lands woven into the fog of London. A sailor whistles a tune he learned in Sierra Leone. A woman hums a lullaby her grandmother once sang in Bengal. A child claps to a rhythm that began centuries ago in an African village and traveled step by step across the sea. These songs are not written down. They pass between people like breath. They change with every telling, but they never disappear. The empire, in all its power, cannot own them. They belong to no one and to everyone. They survive the rulers, the wars, the walls. Even as nations rise and fall, the music endures soft, patient, defiant. In a small town hall in London, an audience gathers to hear a concert of imperial music. The program lists composers from every corner of the realm, marches from Canada, hymns from India, songs from Africa. The listeners expect pride, but what they find instead is longing. Each note feels both near and far, the sound of belonging and exile entwined. It is beautiful, and it is sad. Meanwhile, on a veranda in Bombay, a British woman sits with a notebook in her lap. She writes by lamplight, listening to the music drifting from the street below, a wedding procession. A rhythm she cannot name, but feels drawn to. She hums it under her breath, and in that hum, something in her heart shifts. She realizes that she has been here long enough, that the land has entered her not as duty, but as melody. Back in Face, England, songs from the colonies begin to change the sound of the island itself. The melancholy of folk tunes finds warmth in foreign rhythms. The hymns of the church meet the pulse of the drum. The music of empire becomes the music of the world. Even the poets begin to listen differently. They no longer write only of empire's reach, but of its echoes of the voices that have spoken back, and the harmony born of contrast. They start to understand that empire is not a single story told from the center outward, but 1,000 stories meeting at the edges. In taverns, theaters, and temples, the air itself vibrates with connection. The British Empire, at its height, becomes less a map than a choir, a chorus of places, peoples, and memories singing in overlapping tones. Some notes are bright with pride, some tremble with grief. Together, they form the song of an age that believes itself eternal and is already beginning to fade. The Queen's portrait still hangs above the stage, but below it, the world has changed. Her empire no longer speaks in one voice, it sings in many. As night deepens, the music slows, the fiddles soften, the drums dim, the singers' voices settle into lullabies. In London, in Lagos, in Delhi, in Kingston, children fall asleep to songs that carry more than one homeland in their melody. Somewhere in those notes, there is both loss and comfort, distance and belonging. The empire has made the world smaller, but the world has made the empire larger than it ever meant to be. It exists now not just on maps or in ledgers, but in memory, rhythm, and sound. It hums beneath every breath, every wave, every silence. And as the stars rise above the world, the same stars that shone over the island when it was only mist and stone, the music continues, softly, endlessly. The drums fade into the ocean's pulse. The flutes drift into the wind. The voices dissolve into night. The songs of the colonies become the songs of the world, and the world, lulled by its own echo, sleeps in harmony. Chapter 12. The Long Shadows of War. Dawn arrives gray and undecided, as if the sky itself has not yet chosen a side. The river in London moves without haste, carrying yesterday's news and the last leaves of summer toward the sea. Somewhere, a milk cart rattles. Somewhere, a church bell counts the hour with dutiful patience. Life, for a few breaths more, appears unchanged. Then notices begin to bloom like winter roses in shop windows and railway halls, small, serious flowers of paper and ink. Meetings on the green. Enlistment at noon. A list of names. The empire, so vast that the sun once never set upon it, narrows instead into faces and hands. Sons with new boots, fathers with old hats, mothers tying scarves tight against a draft of worry. No trumpets here, only the quiet decision of a million ordinary mornings becoming something else. In barracks and schoolrooms, in island villages and continental cities, the same story repeats. A letter, a handshake, a promise to write. Packets of tobacco wrapped with thread, Bibles with names in neat script, locks of hair tucked into envelopes that smell faintly of lavender and stove smoke. The world has learned to move quickly by train. Now, sorrow will learn the same timetable, and yet this is not a tale of thunder. This is a story told at the speed of breath. The First World War begins, and the empire steadies itself like a hand on a railing, the better to descend into darkness calmly. From Canada's cold, men come with the stride of long winters, their breath making ghosts in the morning air. From Australia and New Zealand, boys whose skies were bigger than maps turn their faces north and call the journey by its proper word, distance. From India, regiments gather beneath banners and sun, their uniforms brushed, their eyes set toward a horizon that does not return their gaze. West African carriers lift loads with quiet strength. Caribbean volunteers sign forms with hands that have learned sugar's weight. Across oceans, the empire pulls its threads together, and the fabric holds. In London, the platforms bloom with flowers, no gardener planted, handkerchiefs waving, eyes wet, kisses that say both goodbye and be brave. The trains swallow these moments and unspool them across the countryside. Steam, iron, fields, fences, the briefness of animals startled and gone. The men inside the carriages lean their heads against glass and watch England in flickers. Orchard, canal, spire, rain. They do not speak much. There is nothing to say that can make fear smaller or love larger. At the front, the vast machine meets the human heart, and the heart goes on beating. The rhythm of this war is not the gallop of cavalry or the clean arc of a banner in sunlight. It is the long, low murmur of held breath, the shuffle of boots in mud, the scrape of pencil against a postcard that will take a month to arrive and a moment to break or mend someone. Even the guns, loud as worlds, reduce, in memory, to pressure, a steady weight in the chest, a weather that will not pass. But we will not live here with the noise. We will live, instead, with the small mercies that endure beside it. A tin cup passed along a trench like a sacrament. A joke bad and beloved told for the 30th time until it transfigures into courage. A letter from home carrying 3 crumbs of cake that have somehow crossed a continent intact. A photograph, thumb-worn, that smells of coal dust and rosewater, and the drawer it slept in. In field hospitals, nurses move like slow light, carrying clean sheets and steadier hours into rooms where clocks do not matter. Their hands are the shore where waves of pain break and recede. They keep diaries at night, lines that say only, "He slept," or "She smiled," or "The sky cleared," and sometimes those sentences are the only victory required of a day. Back on the Island, the Empire's second heartbeat, the engine changes its tempo to match the first. Factories work by lantern, women step onto platforms and into workshops, tying hair back with scarves the color of courage. They lift, assemble, rivet. They count, tally, test. Time, which once belonged to mills and markets, belongs now to necessity and care. Tea breaks become strategy. Friendship becomes infrastructure. In villages, the church doors remain unlocked, as if worry might come in at any hour and need a seat. Candles burn next to names, written carefully in chalk, a list that smudges under the caretaker's sleeve and is written again because remembrance is a kind of repair. Harvests continue, cabbages glistening, potatoes lifting from dark soil like moons, apples stacked in crates that smell of autumn and patience. Even grief must eat. Across the seas, the same rituals bloom in other soils. Gurdwaras and temples, mosques and chapels fill with soft voices. Prayers rise not in one language but in the braided murmur of many, and perhaps heaven appreciates the harmony more than the words. Children learn new geographies. Gallipoli, Ypres, the psalm names that do not sound like places so much as tides. They recite them the way one recites a caution or a charm. And then there is silence, the true currency of this war. Silence in a letter that doesn't come. Silence at a door, where the messenger stands, hat in hand. Silence at the dinner table, where a chair remains politely unscuffed by its absent owner. Silence in the garden, where a mother weeds with a precision that is not horticulture, but survival. The empire has learned to speak across telegraphs and rails. Now it learns to listen in the spaces between. Yet history is not merely sorrow moving from name to name. It is also the stubborn, ordinary work of kindness. A chaplain who carries a tin of condensed milk in his pocket to sweeten someone's minute. A corporal who saves a stray dog and changes a unit's weather for a week. A village that gathers socks the way once it gathered stories, knitting warmth into stitches that anchor men to home. A letter with the sentence, "I am not afraid today," posted so it will arrive on a day when someone is. In the dominions and colonies, the news arrives like weather fronts, storms on the Channel, sun in Mesopotamia, frost in the Vosges. Communities mark the maps with pins and ribbon, till them with hope, harvest them with patience. A Sikh farmer in the Punjab lifts his eyes from the furrow and imagines a sun under a foreign star. A Maori elder sings a chant of protection. A Jamaican schoolteacher counts students by fingernail, moonlight, and writes a letter to a London paper that will be read on a tram by a stranger who will never forget it. The empire, once a geometry of red, becomes a web of care, not the care of rulers for ruled, nor the care of conquered for crown, but the care of human beings for names. On windless nights, you could draw a map by listening. A mother whispering in Manchester, an aunt humming in Melbourne, a brother praying in Accra, a wife counting breaths in Lahore, all of them tethered to a single unseen shore. And then the end begins, as endings do, with fatigue that feels like climate. Armistice is a word said softly at first, as if speaking it too loudly might frighten it away. Bells, unused to joy, ring themselves briefly hoarse. People pour into streets they had learned to traverse only by necessity. Strangers place hands on one another's shoulders, as if checking for solidity. The relief is oceanic, and, like the ocean, contains storms, for victory does not resurrect. It does not refill chairs. It cannot teach a clock to run backward. What it can do, what it does, is unclench the fist of time, so that morning feels possible again. Men return, some with medals, many with quiet. They step onto platforms that smell of bread and coal and rain. The trinity of home. Mothers look twice at boys who went away and came back shaped like men they do not recognize and love completely. Children reach for hands that grip too hard, then gentler, then just right. In pockets, odd souvenirs. A handful of foreign coins, a pressed flower, a joke written on a scrap of ration wrapper that is not funny anymore and never will be again. The empire takes stock with numbers because numbers are neat. But loss will not be tidied. It insists on being particular. It is the curl of hair in a locket, the tilt of a laugh that lives now only in the shape another person's mouth makes in imitation, the dent in a pillow. Memorials rise in stone and in habit. 2 minutes each year, when even machinery consents to be still. Poppies that burn without flame. A silence that is not absence but presence turned inward. At the edges of the map, something else has begun. A thought that was seeded before the war and watered by its rain. Men who fought together speak afterward of fairness with a new grammar. Communities that sent their best do not wish to be spoken for forever. The empire listens as if to a noise in the next room. It is not alarm yet, it is awareness. And still, there is healing, slow as moss. Cities sweep glass from streets and rebuild windows to be kinder to light. Bridges relearn the weight of ordinary wagons. Gardens remember how to grow without urgency, and children remember how to run without direction. Lovers write long letters about nothing at last, the nothing that is everything. Weather, dreams, a new kettle, a silly song from the music hall. The dead become teachers, not with sermons, but with rooms that remain intact, watched over by dust and love. A world that once believed in endless ascent learns to kneel, to mend, to measure glory, in beds made and loaves sliced and afternoons given over, perfectly, to doing not much. The empire, touched and tempered, does not know yet that it has turned toward evening. But it has learned, in these long shadows, how to move more quietly. It knows the price of pride and the weight of promises. It has held its breath for years, and now exhales, shaky but sure, into a different century than the one it expected. Night returns to the river. The water carries wreaths of reflected lamps downstream. On the embankment, a man stops, removes his hat to no one in particular, and closes his eyes for the length of a breath. He is not praying, exactly. He is remembering the exact pitch of a friend's laugh. When he opens his eyes, the city is the same and not the same. His life the same and not the same. He puts his hat back on and walks home. And you too may rest. The long shadows of war do not end when the sun sets. They lengthen and soften until they are almost indistinguishable from the shade of trees in late afternoon, the kind of shade in which a body can sit and be quiet and go on. The world will go on. Tomorrow we'll have milk carts and church bells and notices in windows, but many will be invitations to dances, to jobs, to weddings, to cricket on a field that once was a parade ground. Breathe with the earth that has learned again how to be only earth. Breathe with the sea that takes and gives. Steady as a heartbeat, breathe with the empire, which has learned that power without tenderness is only noise. Close your eyes. The lists are folded. The lamps are shaded. The trains, for one night, keep gentler time. In the hush that follows, the names are safe. Chapter 13. The Roar of Change. Morning returns as a murmur, not a march. The war has folded itself into photographs and granite and ritual, and the island wakes to a quieter vow, to make ordinary life extraordinary by tending it carefully. Streets sweep their own dust away. Shopkeepers lift their blinds as if they are lifting a weight from the century. Bread queues shorten into strolls. The sky, undecided for years, leans toward blue. There is music again, and it is not a hymn or Tenzit Manichin, a drum. It is a restless, laughing thread that slips under doors and out of windows and along the river like sunlight. Someone brought it home on a ship. Someone else taught it to a piano that had learned to be serious, and now the sound refuses to stay still. A gramophone needle finds its groove, and the room grins. The old dances, measured and mannerly, soften into something looser, kinder to the knees and braver to the heart. Jazz flickers through parlors and basements. Brass learns to whisper. The drum becomes a smile you can hear. The cities change their faces. Glass walks closer to the street. Corners sharpen. Stairwells coil like seashells. A new geometry, sleek, striped. Certain arrives in the hotels and cinemas and ocean liners. The age names it elegance and builds with it, because the future must look like the future even when yesterday still lingers on the tongue. Lifts sigh open with a courteous hush. Lobby clocks keep time as if time were a favor. Theaters bloom in velvet and electric constellations. Light learns choreography. On wireless sets, the size of cabinets, voices cross counties and seas. as though fences and tides are polite suggestions. A woman in a farmhouse kitchen hears a violin in London before her kettle boils. A fisherman in a northern port listens to a lecture about stars while mending his nets, and nods, and mends, and nods. The nation discovers itself as a conversation. The empire, too, leans in faint signals from far stations, names spoken into static like lanterns carried through mist. Cairo, Delhi, Melbourne, Accra. The world grows intimate, a quiet miracle made of valves and wire. At tables large and small, paper finds ink and becomes law kinder than the last draft. Some doors open. Women who once rolled bandages now roll their sleeves to vote. Their hands, which learned the weight of work, learn the weight of a pencil marking a future. Children stay longer in school. Their sums add up to more than wages. Their reading uncorks worlds. A constable pauses beneath a poster about housing and sees for the first time his own family inside the diagram of promised rooms and light. Progress is not a parade, it is a habit. Across the water in Ireland, a different habit takes hold, of naming home in a voice that does not ask permission. Flags are folded, raised, disputed, songs change key, borders lift from maps and lie down across fields. Grief learns the geography of reconciliation, and love learns to say ours without insisting on yours. The island listens, careful and chastened, as if remembering a broken cup and promising to set it down more gently next time. In India, a man in plain cloth walks at the speed of conscience. He teaches a nation how to turn the body into a sentence the empire must read. Spinning wheels turn like small moons. Salt, that soft necessity, becomes a banner. Letters pass between governors' desks and village tables, each written in a different ink. Authority and hope. The empire, practiced in answering with schedules, finds itself addressed by silence and sandals. Somewhere in a hill station, a civil servant pauses over his tea and cannot articulate the ache he feels, only that the air itself seems to be facing him with a question. The decade gathers nerve. Aeroplanes buzz like tin dragonflies over meadows, then grow up and lift the horizon into a chair you can sit in. A pilot watches the island become a puzzle of hedges and roofs and rivers, a delicately painted tray held in the lap of the sea. He lands to applause that feels like wind. On the water, white ships slide between continents, as if the ocean were a polished floor and they were dancers who never tire. In the dark, a projector throws a world onto a sheet, and people forget their names for 90 minutes, and then, kindly, remember them again. Factories do not sleep, but they learn to dream. Lines smoother, windows larger, wages sometimes steadier. The week invents an end for itself. A Saturday afternoon begins to feel like permission. Football grounds turn into lungs. A cheer goes up, and the tired week exhales. In allotments, cabbages posture like generals and beans climb twine with the focus of monks. The nation, that old garden, remembers how to tend its rows. And then, a new weather arrives, not from the sky but from the invisible barometers of price and promise. The markets cough, falter, buckle. Numbers that were song become stones in pockets. Men in good coats line up like fence posts at dawn, pretending the cold is the reason their hands shake. Mothers turn stew into arithmetic and make the day add up against its will. The radio that made the world smaller brings the bad news quickly and repeats it gently because gentleness is the only thing it can afford. The empire feels the tremor in its wrists. Exports shiver. Ledgers stare back without courtesy. In port towns, the cranes bow their heads. In cotton mills, rooms that once hummed now murmur like bees drowsy under rain. Relief lines coil around corners until they look like snakes the town cannot charm. Still, kindness does its unphotographed work. A baker adds a heel to a loaf and calls it crust. A bus conductor looks away when the fare is nearly exact. A schoolteacher brings warmth in the form of story and sets it on her pupils' desks like bowls of soup. Ideas turn practical out of necessity. Councils talk of housing not as aspiration but as plumbing. Artists paint hunger with light in it. A preacher whose church leaks collects tin for roofs and calls it grace. The empire's administrators, trained to think in precincts and railheads, add a new column to their minds for mercy. Across the world, the dominions and colonies watch the center adjust its tie and ask themselves what it would mean not to wear that tie at all. In workshops, clever hands make beautiful things from shortages. A chair from two broken ones, a jacket turned, a clock coaxed into one more year of accuracy. In parlors, people learn the art of listening again, the wireless low, the needle, careful on a record that must last, the silence afterward committed to memory, as if it too were a song. A child asks a question about money, and an adult answers with a story about time. The lesson is received. Politics, which had been content with grand nouns, learns the small verbs: feed, house, mend, teach. The island discovers its appetite for fairness and begins to set a table it hopes everyone can sit at. Not everyone agrees on the menu, but the debate itself feels like food. The empire watches this domestic rehearsal and wonders if the same attention might, one day soon, be brought to rooms overseas. On boulevards far away, boots multiply. A rhetoric of marching tidy, thrilling, false, rehearses itself until even the sidewalk stands straighter. The radio, which had carried waltzes and weather, begins to carry darker weather in perfect mechanical clarity. Europe Old Theater, oldest archive, sets its props out for a story the audience already knows by heart and would give anything not to hear again. In London, men and women read the papers like one listens to a kettle. One does not want to boil, and yet expects will. The empire, worldly and weary, packs away its jubilee bunting and counts its blankets. Still, life insists on its ordinary miracles. Spring keeps its appointment with the hedges. A postman whistles a tune that belonged to a dance and now belongs to a street. The post finds the baby's card and the black-edged envelope alike. The same hand that sorts them blesses both with the same care. Lovers meet beneath a clock and agree that 5 minutes early is not early at all but a tone of affection. A gardener turns compost and thinks of patience made visible. In classrooms, maps remain red, but teachers begin to color in the oceans with stories, and stories do not salute. A boy in Nairobi recites Shakespeare and then writes his own line that tastes of mango and Sunday A. Girl in Glasgow reads a poem from Bengal and hears the sea in it, the same sea that has spent a century carrying more than cargo. The empire's children learn from one another without filling out forms for permission. On factory notice boards, new words appear: pay board, sick fund, holiday. On union tables, minutes, motions, tea rings. On kitchen mantels, a jar labeled next time. There is dignity in the housekeeping of hope. Governments change their tone from trumpet to ledger. Reforms step down from speeches and into drains and school meals. The island tests the notion that decency can be a policy, and finds that, when applied, it resembles fresh paint and quiet relief. Airfields multiply like commas in a sentence that has not yet decided where it ends. Pilots map clouds, mechanics learn the grammar of bolts. Across harbors, gray hulls re-enter the lexicon of the visible. Sailors learn again the old superstition of never whistling on deck, lest you call a wind you cannot dismiss. The empire, which has spent a decade repairing its breath, inhales. Yet even here, in the gathering seriousness, there is softness. A warden tries on a helmet and laughs at his own reflection, and then, embarrassed, keeps it on with resolve. A seamstress hems blackout curtains and imagines stars, learning for a while to be private. A child asks if the moon will be turned off. A mother answers that the moon works for no one and kisses the top of the child's head where the hair smells of soap and sleep. Across the world, those who once marched in one uniform, under one flag, feel the tug of different purposes. In Delhi, the footfalls of protest sound like rain. In Accra, a meeting hall warms with the heat of sentence after sentence that begins with "we." In Sydney and Ottawa and Johannesburg, editors draft columns that discuss partnership like equals might discuss a journey. How far, how fast, and who chooses the road. Empires are never only what they do, they are also what they allow to be thought. The thoughts are ripening. Meanwhile, the arts, always early, record the weather before it arrives. Novels whisper the suspicion that comfort may be a costume. Plays invite audiences to laugh past a lump in the throat. Photographs capture faces at bus stops with courage hiding just behind the eyes. And music, always the quickest messenger, changes key, not to frighten but to warn kindly. The dance is about to require a different step. By late afternoon of this long decade, the light turns a color that belongs only to endings and beginnings at once. People look up without meaning to. Shop signs glow braver in that honeyed hour. A clerk finishing a column of figures pauses, adds them again, and then writes at the bottom, as if addressing the sum, enough. She closes the ledger and feels an odd, steady peace. There will be more work, and she will do it, and that will be that. Evening. In tenements and terraces, the kettles agree on their song. A boy winds a clock with ceremony, as if he is the caretaker of time itself. On the wireless, a voice calm as a folded blanket reads the news, and then reads the weather, and between the two, leaves a silence big enough for listeners to set down their fear and pick up their courage. Couples go out to look at the sky just because it is there. A cat claims a sill. A bicycle leans into shadow as if it were sleep. This is the roar of change. Not only noise, not only speed, but the dense, layered sound of a world revising itself without quite saying so. It is law moderated by mercy, industry braided with art, pride tempered by loss, distance shortened by wire and willingness. It is the empire learning to hear before it speaks, the island learning to care before it claims, people learning to be citizens not of a banner but of each other. Night settles, and with it a vow so small it can fit in a pocket. To be ready without becoming hard, to be brave without becoming cruel, to be steadfast without forgetting how to bend. Somewhere a siren is tested and then falls quiet, its mouth closed like a promise. Somewhere a window is latched, somewhere else it is left open on purpose, because air matters. Sleep finds you in this hinge of years. The gramophone's needle lifts, the light clicks, the street gives up its last car. The empire dozes in a chair that has molded to its shape, and the chair, faithful, holds. Tomorrow will bring headlines and meetings and the particular courage of going to work. But for now, breathe with the ordinary, the clock, the cat, the human heart rehearsing calm. Change has roared, and having announced itself, has learned to purr. Chapter 14. The Second Storm. The century pauses, takes one deep breath, and forgets how to exhale. For a while, the tension is only weather, low clouds, slow headlines, diplomats crossing carpets with smiles that do not reach their eyes. The island, older and wiser, hopes that this is just thunder passing somewhere else. But hope is a quiet voice. Engines are louder. The first bombs do not fall on London, they fall on certainty. Across Europe, maps rearrange themselves without permission. Old alliances crack like ice. The empire that once felt infinite begins to feel finite again. Its borders, not lines of pride, but of exposure. In London, the sirens start as rumors. People look up from newspapers, glance toward the ceiling, and return to their tea. Then the sirens come again, longer, truer. This time, they listen. Shops darken their windows, curtains turn black. Children learn to sleep in cellars with one hand over their ears and the other still clutching a toy. This war is different from the last. It is not fought far away, it arrives in the air itself. The empire that once stretched across oceans must now stretch across fear. And yet, even as the night hums with engines, something steadier hums beneath. Resolve. The cities become underground villages. Tunnels fill with beds, kitchens, laughter, and song. A violin plays in the dark while dust shakes from the rafters. A nurse brews tea beside an unexploded world. Each morning, the people rise from the earth like seeds after a storm. They sweep their steps, straighten their hats, and go to work. Far away, the empire answers. From Canada's forests, timber. From India's fields, grain. From Africa's ports, courage. The seas that once carried trade now carry duty. Convoys crawl across gray water under gray skies, and the sailors whisper old songs that speak of home as if the word itself could float. In the deserts of North Africa, soldiers march beneath stars so bright they seem close enough to pluck. They speak softly, share canteens, and joke about the weather that will never know snow. In Burma, the jungle closes around men who move with the patience of prayer. In the Pacific, islands appear and vanish in firelight. Everywhere the world turns to smoke and waiting. Back home, ration books replace recipes. Families learn the arithmetic of enough. A mother counts sugar cubes as carefully as love letters. A father patches boots until they look like testimony. Neighbors trade what they can. Eggs for coal, stories for strength. The war teaches everyone to measure wealth in kindness. The Queen's voice, steady, almost maternal, reaches across the radio waves. We shall not fail. The Empire listens, not because it must, but because it wants to. Even those who doubt believe in the sound of courage when they hear it. Courage, it seems, has no accent. Time slows. Each night is counted in minutes between sirens. Each dawn begins with dust and gratitude. The churches, the pubs, the buses all bear the same perfume of smoke and survival. And somewhere above, unseen bombers turn the sky into a ledger, each explosion a line that must one day be balanced by peace. The Empire, though scattered, breathes as one. Letters cross oceans with stamps of hope and censorship alike. Inside them, hearts speak simply, still alive, still proud, still yours. It is enough. When the tide finally turns, it is not with fanfare but fatigue. The soldiers who land on beaches do so without shouting. Their boots sink into sand that remembers every age of conquest, and for once, conquest means homecoming. The war drags on, its shadow longer than its shape. When victory comes, it does not strut. It kneels. It bows to the dead, salutes the living, and lets the silence take its rightful place. On the day the sirens sound for peace, no one quite believes it. People step from shelters slowly, blinking in unbombed daylight. The air smells of brick dust and lilac. A child asks if the noise will start again. A woman answers, "Not tonight," and everyone decides to believe her. The world, once broken, begins to hum again. Streetlights flicker back to life. Pianos are tuned. Couples dance in squares still pocked with shrapnel, their footsteps tracing a rhythm that says, "We are still here." And somewhere, across the sea, nations that once bowed to the Empire begin to rise in their own morning light. They remember how to stand, and in standing, remind Britain how to rest. The second storm passes, leaving not ruin, but reflection. The Empire has seen the limits of force, the necessity of mercy, the fragility of pride. Now the task is no longer to rule, but to rebuild, not walls or weapons, but trust. Night falls on a quieter world. The air raid sirens are silent now, but their echo lingers in memory, a reminder that even in darkness, there was singing. The sea, forever neutral, resumes its rhythm. Ships return to trade, their hulls patched, their hearts lighter, and the island, once again surrounded by mist and salt, takes a long, trembling breath. It has survived 2 storms. It will weather the dawn. Chapter 15. Twilight over the Empire. Evening settles slowly over the world, not the darkness of defeat, but the gentle dimming of a long day. The red upon the map, once bright as fire, begins to fade to rose, then to gold, then to something softer still, memory. The Empire does not collapse, it exhales. The war is done, and peace, fragile as a newborn, stretches its limbs. London wakes to quiet mornings, its skyline bruised but unbowed. Children play where rubble once lay, gardens bloom through cracks in the pavement. The air smells of coal, of tea, of new beginnings, and far across the oceans, other dawns rise. In Delhi, in Accra, in Kingston, in Kuala Lumpur, the same light spills across streets, filled with sound voices that had waited too long to call themselves free. It is not rebellion now, but return. Nations stepping back into their own names. India is first, and the world holds its breath. Trains carry millions, some toward home, some away from it, their wheels turning like history itself, grinding, grieving, unstoppable. Flags change, borders shift, prayers rise in every tongue. The Union Jack lowers slowly in the Delhi dusk, and in that moment the empire begins to dream of peace instead of power. The Queen, a new one now, young, calm, steady as morning, watches the transformation with grace learned from her mother and her grandmother before her. She knows that endings can be dignified, that love of country need not be love of dominion. She travels to the far edges of the map, to jungles, deserts, islands, and everywhere she goes, people gather, not to bow, but to witness. The air between them is filled with something new. Respect without rule, memory without bitterness. In the Caribbean, steel drums echo through bright streets. In Africa, independence banners wave like sails. In Asia, cities once bound by empire begin to write their own symphonies. The empire becomes what it should have always been: a conversation, not a command. Back in Britain, the island adjusts. Its factories, once tuned to war, learn the rhythm of peace. Men who had carried rifles now carry briefcases. Women who had driven ambulances now run offices, schools, and councils. The country feels smaller, perhaps, but also freer. No longer the world's master, but its neighbor. Immigrants arrive from the very places the empire once claimed. Ships glide up the Thames carrying families from Jamaica, from Trinidad, from India, from Pakistan. They bring with them language and laughter, spices and songs, hope folded into suitcases. Britain, grey and cold, warms by their presence. In the markets of London, the air begins to change. Ginger, curry, sugarcane, voices of many rhythms mingling beneath the same grey sky. A new empire forms, not of rule, but of home. Some resist the change, afraid of what they do not yet understand. But the children, as always, know better. They grow up together in brick terraces and playgrounds, their accents blending, their friendships unbothered by maps. For them, empire is already a story, a bedtime tale of kings and ships and faraway places that sound like dreams. Beyond Britain, nations write their own first chapters. Ghana lifts its flag, black star on gold, and the crowd sings so loudly it shakes the dust from colonial walls. Nigeria follows, Kenya follows, the Caribbean islands, the Pacific. Each Independence Day feels like a sunrise seen from a different shore. The empire's red dissolves into a mosaic of colors, each one bright, defiant, alive. And yet, for all the change, a thread remains: a shared language, a shared love of words and games and gardens and weather. Cricket fields bloom where once stood forts. Poets from Lagos write sonnets. Singers from Kingston fill the airwaves of London. The empire transformed hums not with command, but with creativity. Its legacy is no longer the flag, but the connection. At home, the old veterans sit in parks and feed pigeons, their medals shining faintly in the soft light. They watch the young pass by, children of every shade, their laughter rising like birds. And though they do not say it, something in their faces softens. Perhaps they understand that this, too, is victory, that the world survived, that it learned to share itself. In the universities, new scholars rewrite history not to erase, but to remember truthfully. They tell of the empires before the empire, of kingdoms that thrived long before the ships arrived, of voices that endured beneath the weight of others. And in those retellings, the story of the British Empire becomes what it was always meant to be: a lesson in ambition, a reflection on consequence, a promise of humility. The old colonies send back art instead of tribute, literature instead of loyalty, ideas instead of obedience. And Britain listens, sometimes awkwardly, often proudly. It begins to see itself not as the center of the world, but as part of its pattern. The sea, once highway and barrier alike, becomes simply sea again. Fishermen mend their nets, sailors steer toward trade instead of conquest, and the ocean resumes its ancient neutrality. It belongs to no one, and welcomes everyone. As the 20th century grows older, the island grows quieter, kinder, humbler. It still dreams of greatness, but now greatness looks like compassion, like medicine, like music, like memory. In the twilight of empire, the air itself feels gentler, as though history, tired but peaceful, has finally sat down beside the fire. The maps on the classroom walls still show the outlines of the world, but the children who look at them no longer see red. They see possibility. Even the monuments seem to breathe differently. The statues stand not as boasts, but as questions. The palaces glow not with command, but with ceremony, a reminder that tradition can survive, even when power does not. And the Queen, older now, smiles with the quiet wisdom of one who has learned to let go with grace. The empire is gone, but the story remains, woven into the languages, the roads, the books, the very rhythm of the sea. It is not something to worship or to mourn, but to understand. A long human dream that outgrew itself, a song that learned harmony only in its final verse. Night deepens. The stars above London are the same that shine above Delhi, Accra, Kingston, and Sydney. They care nothing for borders or names. They only shimmer, constant, indifferent, kind. The island sleeps, smaller now, but whole. The world breathes together, and for the first time in centuries, the silence feels like peace. Chapter 16. A New Dawn. The world wakes softly. After centuries of storms and sails, of conquest and consequence, of pride and pain, the air has changed. It smells of rain and ink, of something freshly written. The empire, that long dream of red and rule, has exhaled its last command, and in its place comes a quieter rhythm. Cooperation, conversation, care. The map, once printed in certainty, now glows with diversity. Each nation has its own color, its own voice. Lines that once divided now connect, and in the center of it all, the island rests smaller than before, but older, wiser, and finally content to share the dawn. The Commonwealth is not an empire reborn. It is an idea reimagined. No chains, no decrees, only choice. A network of nations joined not by force, but by familiarity. By language, law, and the faint pulse of shared memory. The Queen, her silver crown gleaming softly beneath a patient sky, becomes less a ruler and more a listener, a figurehead of continuity in a world learning to move without conquest. In the great hall at Marlborough House, flags ripple in still air, blues, greens, yellows, reds, the colors of independence gathered together, not as servants but as equals. Voices rise in dozens of accents, weaving together like the threads of a tapestry that has learned to mend itself. There is warmth here, and a sense of beginning again. Outside, London hums with new life. The war-blackened buildings have been scrubbed and rebuilt. The streets once lined with ration queues now glow with shop fronts and cinema lights. The fog of coal has lifted. The air carries the sound of laughter and new languages. In Notting Hill, steel drums play beneath bunting. In Birmingham, the scent of curry floats through the rain. In Manchester, children of every heritage walk to school together, their shoes scuffing the same pavement, their futures written in the same ink. The empire has folded inward, but the world has folded outward. Every ship that once left the Thames now seems to return not with goods, but with people, with culture, with the living echoes of the lands Britain once called its own. And instead of ruling them, the island now hosts them. In the music of its streets, you can hear every century at once. Drums and violins, bells and call to prayer, jazz and hymn. The sound is not chaos, it is conversation. In the 1,960 seconds, The air itself seems to hum with electricity. Technology shrinks the world even further. Satellites orbit above what once were colonies, sending back pictures of a planet with no borders at all. The empire has become a single blue sphere turning in the dark. On it, every nation is lit by the same Sunday. A poet writes, "We are the children of the empire and the dawn." He means not inheritance, but possibility that from something vast and flawed, something beautiful might yet grow. A musician in London, born of Caribbean parents, strums a guitar and sings of belonging. A writer in Kenya sends her first manuscript to an English publisher, and the island that once sent stories to the world now learns to receive them in return. In universities, new subjects are taught: post-colonial thought, global history, literature of resistance and renewal. Students sit in lecture halls once reserved for empire's planners and listen to the voices of those who were once ruled. And slowly, softly, the understanding deepens that the story was never one-sided, that the empire's truest legacy may be the dialogue that followed its end. The queen travels still, not to inspect, but to honor. Her handshakes are not decrees, they are bridges. She kneels to plant trees, to comfort, to listen. She understands that the crown now gleams not with authority, but with remembrance. In her eyes there is the knowledge that time moves only forward, that every farewell contains the seed of a new friendship. At home, the island adjusts to being ordinary again, and in that ordinariness finds peace. Factories close, new industries bloom, computers, art, science, film. The empire of coal and cotton becomes an empire of creativity and compassion. Hospitals open where barracks once stood, classrooms where command centers had been. It is not glory that fills the island now, but gratitude. Across the world, former colonies find their rhythm. Some struggle, some soar, all grow. New flags rise in sunlit parades. New anthems fill the air with hope. New leaders stand before their people and promise tomorrow. The Queen sends messages of congratulations, written in careful script. She means every word. The Commonwealth expands not through conquest but through invitation. Nations join, who were never ruled by Britain at all, drawn not by history but by harmony. The idea has become something greater than its origin, a constellation of equals, a shared belief that friendship can outlast empire. In the years that follow, the old island learns humility. It becomes a home to voices it once could not hear. Its food, its music, its language grow brighter, richer, more complete. The markets fill with spices from every latitude. The buses carry accents from every ocean. A new Britain emerges, one not defined by power, but by the willingness to change. And through it all, the Queen remains steady as the tide. Through decades of loss and renewal, she becomes less monarch than memory, a living thread between what was and what might yet be. Her people, too, change. They stop saying empire and start saying world. They stop asking, what do we rule? And begin asking, who do we belong to? The question itself is freedom. At the turn of the millennium, the sky fills with fireworks. The island, still wrapped in cloud and rain, looks outward with pride. Not the pride of ownership, but of endurance. The pride of a nation that has learned to be part of something larger than itself. Children count down the seconds to midnight, their voices blending with 1,000 others across the globe. And when the bells ring, it is not just for Britain, but for everyone who once lived beneath its shadow and now walks freely in its light. In the quiet after the celebration, the Thames glimmers like liquid history. Its surface reflects the glow of a city that has learned to forgive itself. The water flows outward, as it always has, past towers and bridges and embankments, past memory and regret, past empire and empire's end. It carries everything with it, the weight of the past and the promise of renewal. As dawn breaks, the city glows in soft gold. The sky clears, the sea breathes. And somewhere, in a home warmed by tea and laughter, an old woman turns off the radio and smiles. She remembers her father speaking of the empire as if it were eternity, and she knows now that eternity was never the point. The point was what remained: the kindness, the connection, the courage to begin again. The sun rises not on empire, but on community. Not on rule, but on understanding. And as light touches every shore once marked in red, it finds a world not conquered, but shared. This is the new dawn, a quiet, radiant hour, when history's noise finally fades, and humanity, tired but wiser, takes its first deep breath of peace. The empire sleeps now, not as a giant, but as a memory, a long, strange dream that taught the world to listen. And in that stillness, the island drifts into mourning. The sea sighs against its stones. The gulls cry above its cliffs. And the story of the British Empire ends not with a bang, but with a lullaby, the sound of the world, at last, breathing as one. Chapter 17. New voices, new dreams. The world no longer turns beneath one flag. It turns beneath many, each bright, distinct, alive. Once, the empire's light came from a single Sunday. Now, it comes from 1,000 dawns, rising together. The Commonwealth is not empire's echo, but its evolution. Not the sound of command, but the murmur of understanding. From the Caribbean to Canada, from the Pacific to the plains of Africa, voices once separated by oceans now speak to one another in peace. They meet not in palaces or battlefields, but in conferences, classrooms, and gardens, places where the future grows quietly. The Queen, now older and serene, moves gently among them, a thread of continuity woven through changing times. She is greeted not by subjects, but by citizens, by children waving flags of their own nations and smiling without fear. At Commonwealth gatherings, the air is full of conversation. No single language dominates. Every accent belongs. Leaders exchange gifts instead of ultimatums, and the speeches speak not of power, but of partnership. The words mutual respect are no longer slogans. They are truths practiced in daylight. The young inherit what the old only imagined. Students from Nairobi study in Oxford. Writers from Trinidad publish in London. Engineers from Delhi design satellites that circle the whole world. The old routes of empire, those long sea lanes drawn in ink, have become invisible highways of knowledge, art, and invention. The world is smaller now, but in its smallness, it feels closer, warmer, kinder. In every city touched by the empire's tide, you can hear the blend, languages layered like notes in a chord. English, Urdu, Yoruba, Creole, each syllable shaping the next, until no one can tell where one story ends and another begins. The empire that once silenced now listens. The Commonwealth, though imperfect, has become something fragile and rare, a meeting place of equals. Its power is not in armies or economies, but in its memory, in the understanding that once the world broke apart and chose, slowly, to mend. In schools across the Commonwealth, children learn new history, not one of victory, but of voices. They read the poetry of Kamau Brathwaite and Derek Walcott, the essays of Chinua Achebe, the novels of Arundhati Roy. They hear the rhythm of truth told in many accents, each adding color to the canvas of remembrance. In Britain, classrooms change too. The walls once lined with maps of conquest now display flags of friendship. Teachers speak not only of what Britain gave to the world, but of what the world gave to Britain. Its food, its words, its laughter, its music. Empires fall, culture endures, and culture, now shared, becomes home. The Commonwealth grows in ways no map can measure. It lives in the laughter of children in Toronto playgrounds, in the scent of jerk chicken rising from London markets, in the cricket matches played under Caribbean sun, in the peacekeepers stationed beneath Pacific skies. It lives in the hands that reach across borders, in letters sent between friends whose grandparents once called each other strangers. The old empire dreamed of rule. The new world dreams of harmony. It is not always easy. Memory has its ghosts. But even ghosts can rest when heard. And now, at last, they are. There are ceremonies. Yes, the Commonwealth Games, the Remembrance Days, the anniversaries marked in quiet dignity. But the truest ceremony is daily life itself. Shared work, shared humor, shared compassion. When floods rise or complace, fires burn. When one nation falters, others send hands and hearts. That is the quiet miracle of this modern age, a legacy of connection, built not by command but by choice. The Queen, her hair silver in the light of late afternoon, looks out over the faces gathered before her. They are not subjects but partners, not colonies but companions. And though time will soon carry her away, she knows what endures, that the world she inherited divided, and the world she leaves behind speaks as one. At her passing, millions mourn not as empire's children, but as humanity's kin. For a moment, the Commonwealth feels like a single heart, beating in many bodies. From cathedral bells to island choirs, from mountain prayer to city silence, the sound is one of gratitude. The new king stands before them not a conqueror, but a caretaker. His task is simpler and harder, to preserve not the dominion but the dialogue, to keep the conversation gentle, to keep the past awake but kind. And as the decades turn, the Commonwealth continues to change. Nations leave, others join. It grows not in size but in spirit. Its strength lies not in sameness but in difference accepted. It is not an empire reborn, but a family relearning how to love one another. In its meetings, you can still hear echoes of the old world, the cadence of British manners, the warmth of island humor, the gravity of African wisdom, the lyric grace of Asian thought. Together, they form a language that needs no dictionary, only empathy. On a quiet night in London, rain begins to fall soft, silver, cleansing. It traces the same river that once carried ships to every shore. But the river does not remember conquest now. It remembers return. The water moves calmly beneath the bridges, reflecting lights from a city that has finally learned how to glow without burning. Across the world, other rivers answer the Ganges, the Niger, the Thames, each flowing freely toward the same sea. Their voices mingle in the deep, a chorus of currents singing one lullaby in many tones. The empire is gone, but the dream has changed. It no longer dreams of rule, but of belonging. Of many homes, one heart. Of many paths, one peace. And if you listen beneath the hum of airplanes, beneath the static of news, beneath the rain itself, you can still hear it. The gentle heartbeat of the Commonwealth, steady as tide, soft as sleep, carrying the new voices and the new dreams of a world at peace with its own history. Chapter 18. Echoes of the Isles. Modern Britain culture, art, rain over London streets. Rain begins as a rumor on the glass. A soft tapping, patient and ordinary, that turns the city into a watercolor. Edges blurred, colors deepened, meanings kinder. London exhales. Pavements shine like polished slate. Buses move like lanterns on wheels. Umbrellas bloom and close. A quiet choreography of strangers who will never know each other's names and never need to. This is modern Britain at its gentlest, a country that has learned to live at human scale, where history walks beside you, not as a parade, but as a companion with a good coat. The morning is a library of small mercies. A cafe door jingles and warm air folds around damp coats. The hiss of milk is an invitation. A barista writes a name imperfectly and smiles perfectly to make up the difference. Outside, the river is the old river in a new light, tidal, reflective, carrying yesterday and making room for today. Bridges hold their famous poses, gulls examine the weather's handwriting, cyclists cut neat parentheses through puddles. The city's accent, many, really collects, in doorways and on steps, vowels from everywhere, learning to share the same sentence. Even the rain seems to have learned patience here. Culture does not announce itself. It spreads like warmth. In a gallery, a child leans toward a Turner sky until the guard gently suggests the horizon is close enough. In a tiny venue down a narrow lane, A singer tests a lyric that wasn't true until it was sung. In a rehearsal room, dancers mark steps with breaths, hearing the floor answer. The island's imagination has never been a single instrument. It's a band, tuning. Strings from the highlands, brass from the midlands, bass lines that sailed from Kingston, tablas that speak of streets with late summer roses and late buses, a penny whistle that remembers cliffs and sends the room there in 6 notes. Poetry survives the way rain survives, by returning. On buses, dog-eared pamphlets peek from tote bags. A line someone heard on the radio finds new weather in a stranger's notebook. In Manchester, a poet writes about warehouses and water and the stubborn sweetness of people who say, "You all right?" as a greeting and as medicine. In Cardiff, a verse moves like tide in 2 languages at once and proves that both are large enough to carry love. In Belfast, a poet measures silence and turns it into a bridge. In Glasgow, a lyric wears steel-toed boots and dances anyway. England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, 4 notes that can be played alone or together, making a chord you know by heart even if you don't know its name. After lunch, the sky opens a little. Shops empty onto streets. Charity books find hands that will make room on already full shelves. A boy in a school blazer runs with a saxophone case, the size of his ambition. The baker's window names its buns as if they were friends. A barber sweeps hair that looks like a small history of the neighborhood. The florist has tulips shouldering past their paper like good news. Modern Britain is not an empire. It is an address book. Markets list the phone numbers of 100 kitchens. Supper smells like a map rewritten by appetite. Jerk and jalfrezi, caul and cullen skink, pasties warm as pockets, kebabs that save the night, chips that forgive everything. In parks, the green persists. It has watched centuries and chooses, repeatedly, to stay. Blackbirds audition for dusk. A dog chooses you, briefly, and then remembers it's actual human and returns with only slight regret. Benches do what benches do, hold. Names carved into slats with penknives are declarations blown small enough to last. A pair of teenagers, too brave to be cold, rehearse a conversation they will both pretend later they did not practice. Somewhere a cricket thwack, somewhere a 5 a side goal and a shout that belongs to no language but joy. Rain makes all of it sound closer. Some places keep the volume low on purpose. A reading room where paper whispers and thoughts have their own coat hooks. A museum where an old clock refuses to be hurried. A terrace of houses that know, from brick to brick, how to keep weather out and warmth in. In a coastal town, a pier holds out its hand to the sea, and the sea takes it, gently, palm against palm. In a market town, the bell that called hands to grain now calls them to coffee. The square forgives the century, its engines, and keeps its cobbles. Everywhere, oldness and newness confer, and more often than not, agree. Modern Britain's art is not only hanging and bound, it's cooked, stitched, sampled, streamed. In Hackney and Handsworth, Ladbroke Grove and Leith, studios hum over takeaways gone lukewarm because the right color finally decided to be found. Community theaters audition hope and find it in abundance. Zines photocopy themselves into existence on kitchen tables that also host homework and rent arithmetic. A beat producer in Leeds sends a file to a rapper in Bristol, who writes on the night bus's upper deck while the city gives him twinkling notes of late windows. A sculptor in St. Ives listens to the Atlantic explain mass and learns a curve from it. Rain again, softer now. Afternoons give themselves to museums, where school groups move in small constellations and discover that armor was a decision and porcelain a patience. In a corner, a volunteer explains a ship in a bottle to a child who, for 1 full minute, believes it was grown, not built. Across town, a science center lets hands teach minds what velocity feels like. A planetarium darkens and noon becomes night, and a collective "oh" rises like a new species of bird. The future, once a thing the island exported, returns as curiosity and stays as collaborative work. On the radio, a DJ whose parents crossed oceans cues a ballad whose grandparents crossed streets. The call-in line threads Birmingham to Bradford, Belfast to Brighton, Newport to Newcastle. Somebody dedicates a song to a someone who said yes this morning. Somebody else says the week nearly had them and thanks a voice for reaching through Friday like a hand. The nation practices being a family with the help of playlists and traffic updates. Traffic is always terrible. People are usually good. Evening tests the light and finds it sufficient. Office towers blink into constellations. Terrace windows stage small plays with excellent casts and limited budgets. In kitchens, pans decide to be brave and do not regret it. The old pub, which has survived fashions, landlords, football seasons, and wallpaper, files another night under proof. The new bar, with its ferns and filament bulbs, tries sincerity and finds it sells. At the theater, a curtain lifts and a quiet audience becomes a single listening animal. On screen, a British film remembers how to be funny without being cruel and how to be sad without being merciless. The credits thank cities by name, and the cities blush a little and pretend they don't. Elsewhere, a night bus leans into rain. Inside, everyone is privately heroic. The nurse whose feet have earned a small throne. The cleaner whose playlist is the world's better half. The student who has seen the idea that will keep them warm for a year and is guarding it like an ember. The older man counting stops as if counting blessings were a habit. Out the window, terraced streets agree to be identical for the comfort of the eyes that need them to be. The driver knows when to wait for the runner who has underestimated the sprint between stops. A chorus of breathless cheers finds him. Courtesy is a working technology. In a small room above a shop, a choir rehearses. They have too few chairs and too many coats. Sopranos settle, altos negotiate tea, tenors crack jokes that would not survive inspection but survive the evening just fine. The conductor asks for less volume and more truth, and the room finds it. A vowel opened like a door, a consonant placed kindly on the note it prefers. Outside, the rain applauds politely on the sill. When they finish, they do not say it, but they have made a space in the week where the world is briefly correct. The islands hum beyond London, each with its own meter. Edinburgh keeps language on a high shelf and hands you a ladder. Glasgow keeps weather in its pocket and lends you a morning of it for a song. The Highlands prove, daily, that silence is an instrument. In the valleys, a choir reaches the ceiling without standing on anything. In Pembrokeshire, cliffs write poems about light and show their drafts to the sea. In the Mourns, granite becomes narrative. On causeway stones, children learn that geology has jokes. The Lake District continues to do the work of adjectives. The Peak District refuses to pick a favorite season. The Cornish coast pretends it is tired of being painted and then arranges itself flatteringly for the train. Cities: Bristol with its bridges and beats, Liverpool with its wit and water, Birmingham with its invention compressed into canals, Leeds with its sleeves rolled and galleries hung trade weekends like postcards. Food, like music, solves problems. In a kebab shop at 1 a.m., peace accords are reached between the very hungry and the mildly philosophical. In a curry house that has celebrated more birthdays than some families, a waiter recognizes a face and says, "The usual?" and witnesses a heart lift. At the Chippy Vinegar writes a brief persuasive essay on steam. Bakeries score loaves as if memory needed an index. Supermarkets devote an aisle to ingredients once considered distant. The distances have moved in and pay council tax. The present keeps a kind guest room for the past. A blue plaque nudges the shoulder and says, "Here, once." A statue wears a scarf in winter and warnings in summer. Streets take new names. Some fight back. Maps learn to be multilingual. Museums change plaques with grace and apologies. Archives upload forgiveness in high resolution. Schools rewrite lessons so that children hear not a solo, but an ensemble. History, given a chair at the table, behaves better. Night deepens. Rain thins to mist. Neon writes cursive on wet stone. On the south bank, two people stand under a shared hood and decide, bravely, to walk further without discussing where. In a tower block, someone opens a window because the air has a secret to tell. On a canal in the Midlands, a narrowboat shivers sympathetically with the cold, and then remembers it has blankets and does not complain. In a coastal village, a lighthouse keeps its opinion of the century to itself and does the one task it promised. Modern Britain dreams in many languages and wakes in one weather. It is complicated on purpose and kind on principle. It gets some things wrong loudly and many things right quietly. It argues as a form of care and cues as a form of prayer. Its greatest technologies remain the kettle and the apology, both endlessly renewable. It is smaller than it once claimed and larger than it once allowed. It makes room. It keeps making room. Across the Isles, the sea practices the old lesson: arrive, leave, return. Ferries knit coasts into conversations. Trains write long sentences no editor could improve. Planes lift. Postcards land. Universities trade questions. Hospitals trade cures. Neighbors trade recipes, and then trade harvests of trust. Football fills Sundays with weatherproof joy. Cricket takes its time and teaches afternoons how to breathe. Rugby insists on honesty and contact and a pint after. And always, art. Murals under flyovers, chamber music in chapels, garage in garages, grime that refuses to be less than poetry, folk songs that annotate time, the stand-up that gives sorrow a chair and then persuades it to laugh, plays that remember the factory floor and the picket line and the kitchen table where the bill that did not yet add up eventually, somehow, did. Films that hold the face of a stranger so long they become family. Close to midnight, the city sets its alarms and relaxes its jaw. Modern Britain is not a destination, it is a practice. It will need tending tomorrow, and will be tended. By nurses and bus drivers, by teachers and cooks, by coders and carers, and the uncounted kindnesses of the uncounted. It does not glow because it has no shadows. It glows because people carry lanterns. The rain stops. The streets, drying, give back a little starfield. Somewhere, a fox inspects the bins like a critic and leaves a brief review. Somewhere else, a window is left ajar in faith that morning will be mild. On the hour, a clock becomes a metronome for sleep. If you lie down now, you can hear it, the Isles in chorus, rivers rehearsing, roofs ticking as they cool, late trains sketching signatures on distance, footsteps soft on stairwells, a kettle preparing tomorrow's argument with gravity. The echoes of the Isles are not loud. They do not need to be. They are steady. They are near. Close your eyes. The galleries dim. The stages rest. The page holds the place you left it. A country made of rain and radios, recipes and refrains, puts its head on its own shoulder and trusts the night. In the morning there will be markets and museums, lessons and letters, scaffolds and skylarks. For now, there is lullaby weather and the knowledge that what you love about this place belongs to more than one time. Sleep. Let the echoes keep watch. Let the Isles, practiced in endurance and tenderness, breathe for you a while. The night is full again, not with noise or news or empire, but with the simple, steady breath of the world at rest. The sea, which once carried ambition, carries only moonlight. The stars hang like lanterns over continents that no longer answer to any crown, and the island, small and sure, listens to the hush it once tried to fill. The story has circled itself. Stone to ship to shore, shore to silence. Every age has spoken, and now the voices fade into one another until they become the same sound. History turning into memory, memory turning into song. The empire sleeps. In London, the river moves under bridges older than kings. The clock that marked so many beginnings continues its patient duty, one heartbeat at a time. The city no longer shouts, it murmurs. Light spills from 1,000 windows, gentle as breath. Somewhere, a train sighs through the distance, and its rhythm echoes the sea. Across the world, dawn and dusk share the same hour. In Delhi, morning stirs with the smell of chai and dust. In Kingston, night lingers with the last warmth of drums. In Accra, markets fold into quiet. In Sydney, gulls argue above the surf. Different skies, the same rhythm. The heartbeat that once called itself empire has learned to keep time for everyone. What remains are stories. A soldier's letter, folded into a locket. A mother's recipe that crossed an ocean. A poem, written in exile, that returned home generations later. These are the true monuments, words and gestures, hand to hand, kept alive because they were worth keeping. They need no marble, they ask only to be remembered kindly. The empire is gone, but its language drifts like pollen. It seeds new gardens of thought and song, blooms in voices that change it and make it new. In those voices, Caribbean, African, Asian, British, there is no single center anymore, only a chorus. The music of the centuries finally finds its key. The island listens. It has learned to be still, to belong to the tide again. The cliffs breathe salt, the fields lie quiet, the cities glow like constellations seen from below. It is no longer the heart of the world, and that, perhaps, is peace. History does not stop. It softens. What was once a command becomes a question, and the question becomes care. Out of conquest came connection. Out of pride, perspective. Out of noise, understanding. The lessons remain, folded into the ordinary. A train whistle, a teacup, a child's voice in a language born of many others. Somewhere, the Queen's portrait still hangs, but time has gentled her into symbol, not of empire, but of endurance. The crown glints faintly in museum light. School children pass by and see not power, but patience. A teacher explains the old world quietly, as if recounting a dream. The children listen, and when the story ends, they do not clap. They simply nod, as if to say, "We understand, and we will do better." Outside, the air is clear. The moon travels across oceans it will never map. Wind touches every flag, indifferent, equal. And below, people sleep, the inheritors of a world that has learned, at last, to share the night. If you close your eyes, you can still hear it. The whisper of sails, the hum of engines, the hush of cities, all fading into the same soft cadence. Empires rise like tides and fall like breaths, but the sea remains, and so does the song. Let it lull you. Let the centuries drift away, their edges blurred by kindness, their battles turned to echoes, their crowns dissolved into light. This is not an ending, only a pause. Tomorrow we'll have new maps, and new mistakes, and new mercies. But for now, there is only the world, turning slowly beneath a sky that belongs to no one. Rest, traveler. The journey is complete. The island sleeps. The empire dreams itself into peace. And the sea, eternal and forgiving, sings the last refrain. We were here. We learned. We loved. We let go. Sleep. Now. The story has finished its circle. The world is quiet again. This is the lullaby of empire. And it is yours.